Okay, good
All right,
evening.
you're being recorded.
Good evening. Call this Town of Thompson Planning and Zoning Commission Subcommittee meeting on the regulation rewrites to order. It is Wednesday, June 24th, 2020 at 6:06 p.m. We will begin with a roll call of commissioners. Mr. Santos.
Brian Santos, present.
Mr. Hill.
Alvin Hill, present.
Mr. Lenke.
John B. Linky, present.
Mr. Krogel.
Mike Krogel, present.
Mr. Rice.
Oh, he's muted. Let me unmute him.
I'm sorry. John Rice, present.
Mr. Werge.
Present.
And Joseph Prody Brown, present. Okay, we will continue with the discussion of comments received on the proposed regulations using the discussion guide from the planner. So first item, Tara, if I'm correct, requires no current action from the commission. Is that right?
Yeah, well, I don't think it does. I mean, if you prefer the language suggestion that Cindy has made there, which is very minor, I can make that change, but it's...
Can I interrupt here?
I personally find it makes it less clear. Yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
Okay. This home occupation and rural business is, to me, I believe I stated my feelings at the last meeting. What I've been doing some research and trying to put together something intelligent to present, and time just did not permit it during the week. So because we do have a big agenda tonight, a lot to go over, I was just wondering if we can just push this off to the next meeting so that I can come up with, a nice outline for the members to review and to really discuss these two, to me, they're incredibly important issues, and they could really bring in an extra amount of work to the zoning office. So I would like to do some more work on it.
So you suggest, so any of these first four items that have to do with home occupation, to just hold off till the next
And the rural business, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And just move on to page 51, the trailers and mobile homes, if that's agreeable with everybody.
Cindy, I'm still unclear on why you think this is going to bring you in more work. Could you just elaborate on that a little?
Well, as I stated at the last meeting, you've made the home occupation, which the Planning and Zoning Commission did a few months ago. You made the home occupation application to be determined by the ZEO, provided I was comfortable with all the criteria that the applicant would meet. And now you're bringing in a rural business, which has to come before the Planning and Zoning Commission. So you eliminated one job as far as preparing applications, preparing memos, information for the commission members, but you replaced it with another job that is going to involve all that work that would have been done, that previously was done on the home occupation permit. Secondly, I think I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. The compliance and with following the conditions of the home of the rural business, I feel is going to be tough. And also because you've allowed it through the last month's discussion in every single district, and every single district is not rural. And I want to pursue that point with the members with some more research. And I did do a little research in this past week, but not enough to do any intelligent presentation to you tonight.
Well, Mr. Chairman, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to listen to a little bit from the commission. I think, you know, it sounds to me a little bit like at the end there that we're still getting hung up on what the intent of a rural business is, and changing that name. You know, limited neighborhood enterprise is the suggestion in this guide was. You know, that part of it being in all the districts. I mean, what is the sense of the members of the commission?
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Santos.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there is still some confusion here, but I will say out of respect for the CEO, and I think we should allow her to come up with the definitions as she sees fit, for at least for us to review properly and give Cindy that respect.
Brian, if that's a motion, I will second that.
Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I mean, we can definitely take a motion and vote. I don't know if it's the consensus of the commission that we hold off on this till next week. I think we can do that without a motion. I'm also happy to entertain a motion if.
Can I make a comment here? Tara?
Sure, Bernie, since you had submitted quite a bit of commentary on this.
Cindy, as you look at this, perhaps a way to look at it is a home occupation that remains entirely within the dwelling, whether you put a percentage limitation on it or not. Might be something that could be approved simply with the ZEO approval. Whereas a home occupation that expands outside the home into the open space or into an accessory building of some sort, that would require a special permit. That allows someone to put an office in their house with maybe 1 or 2 employees without having to go through the entire special permit route, but requires someone whose activity could impact the neighbors to have to do a special permit.
I am taking your suggestions and am going to pull them in with how I'm feeling about the 2 issues. So thank you, Bernie.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I mean, for whatever it's worth, Bernie, that's very close to what's being proposed here anyway.
Okay.
It's not precisely the case, but it's pretty close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr.
So
Chairman.
is that you guys want to table this or you want to talk about it? What are we doing here?
Go ahead, Mr. Lenke.
Cindy comes back.
Go ahead, Mr. Lenke.
I was just gonna say, if you want to have a little discussion on it, I think that's gonna that could impact it is if you had like 2 employees that includes parking space or whatever. So you know that's part of the whole. So I believe we should
Hurried up, I went to the Zoom meeting.
Yeah.
But
You on mute?
yeah.
Okay, so I mean, so my sense is if we're not going to come to a decision today, we should just move on. I feel like we talked about it a lot.
The thing is that if I want to go,
Sorry, Mr. Rice, are you?
All day long.
Mr. Rice, did you want to say something?
I
think. So, I mean, so if we're not ready to make a decision on any of these things today, then I think we should just move on. We do have some pretty lengthy discussions ahead of us. So if we're not going to be ready to make a decision today, I think we need to move on.
I agree.
Definitely.
Okay, so everyone, please, the next time we meet, we absolutely need to make some decisions on these 4 items. 3 on page 49 and 1 on page 50. I think, yeah. So we will start there at our next meeting, and we will make a decision first thing. So now we turn to page 51. This is Article 5A, Section 2, trailers and mobile homes. I know Mr. Rice had suggested a note to discuss this, and as Tira pointed out, it came in a little bit late in the game. So we just wanted to have a discussion and determine if there are any changes that we wish to make to this section as it's written. John Rice, did you have anything specific that you wanted to talk about in this section? Since you had brought up to Tira that you wanted to discuss it.
He's muted again.
Well, I'm sorry, Joe. I muted myself because I have my nephew. I'm trying to, I was trying to split screen my computer so I can follow, because I didn't print out all that paperwork. And I was kind of concerned that if I was at the discussion period that Tara sent, that I would lose the Zoom, but no, I don't have it. Just carry on until I get this set up.
Okay. Tira, we were waiting for some NDDH recommendations. Have those come in yet?
They have not. I did communicate with them again today, and they are super behind because of COVID-19, and they're getting all kinds of temporary permit requests that they don't normally get. And, you know, she said this week, you know, for whatever it's worth, and I mentioned this earlier in this discussion guide, this stuff is pretty well copied over from what is already in place. So I guess the question here would be, and there are some changes, most notably, I did add the provision that if somebody is building a home, that we may grant them permission to live in on a temporary basis, a mobile home. And if they lost a home due to fire, that we would allow them to for a period of up to a year in both cases. I think that was the most substantive change. So I guess the question is to the commission, based on their experience with the issue, does the existing regulatory language fail to address issues that arise? Because that would be where we would want to make the changes.
Right.
What do you want to change?
I don't think she's advocating a change. I think Tira's saying if the commission feels there needs to be a change, we should make it here.
Then what is it, and where should and how should we change it?
Yeah, I don't see a need.
Okay.
What?
And again, the only change that I made that was substantive was to be permissive of allowing temporary residence in a mobile home in the case of somebody building a home on a lot who wants to reside on the property before they get a CO for a period of up to a year, and allowing it always in the case of a home lost to a disaster, be it a flood, a fire, whatever, that we would give that permission for a period of up to a year as a temporary certificate of occupancy. That's the only substantive change.
Well, the other change is that you allowing the trailers, I believe it's changed, correct me if I'm wrong, 14 continuous days from April 1st to December 31st. The point
Oh,
of,
yes, Cindy's right. Cindy's right.
So, you know, the general consensus that I have of this is, you know, you do still have the current, you can stay in a trailer for 14 days and then you have to leave it. And of course, we all know people stay in the trailer for 14 days, leave 2 days, and then come back. So if there's issues with that, with campers doing that now on their property in the lakes areas, then there's going to continue to be issues after the regulation is passed. You're not really solving giving any solution for a summer resident that owns a lot and wants to have their camper on the lot for 3 months consecutively, 3 or 4 months for the summer. So you're not giving any solution to that. And so that's your choice.
Well, I guess my question for that is, and this is what I was hoping to get the NDDH response back from, is that an actual health and safety issue? Because if it is a health and safety issue, then that would be where I would take their guidelines in. If it's just that for some reason we don't like it, that goes back to, well, why not?
Right.
The reason to disallow it is if it creates an issue, particularly with obviously the waste in the trailer or the mobile home and needing to be pumped.
Right. And we're on the same page with that. So I guess
Yeah.
we have to wait to see what the health department says.
On that one,
Mr.
definitely. The other, I think, is the one, that's why I said it was more substantive. And if the commission has any opinions on that in terms of wanting it or not wanting it, this is the time to bring it up.
Not on.
Yeah, may
what
I
are you
say
talking-
something, Mr.
Mr. Hill.
In order for a trailer to be on a lot, one, it has to have an existing or a new septic system. And statutes also says that any trailer after 3 days is a permanent structure. So one, they would have to have a building permit and Department of Health permit to do that.
Okay, so what regulation says that? A building regulation? Building
Correct.
standard?
Yep.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so regardless, the 5A Section 2, number 3, we need the NDDH feedback.
Yeah, I think as to those other changes, I think those are reasonable, and without objection, I would suggest accepting this section as written, pending any contrary information from NDDH.
So you want to leave the December in? The two weeks on a piece of land for campers? You want to leave that in till December? And you don't want to make it seasonal?
Yeah, I
You're
guess.
still
Well,
gonna need,
it is seasonal. They're disallowed for the 3 months of hard winter.
Okay.
Yep.
Whatever.
again, you still are going to need an adequate septic system unless you're on liquid sewer and water.
Or you're hooked up, Mr. Chairman, unless, like Mr. Hill just said, is unless if they can have them hookups that, like those companies that bring in the porta johns, they have these setups where they bring in a tank and everything, and they hook it up, and it's like having a septic system, and then they'll be able to get it pumped out. It can be pumped out every 2 weeks, one every 30 days, or whatever the size tank they want, but they have to rent that to do that. So it's adequate sanitation. That could be used too.
I think that we should.
Yeah, that's the part we're going to wait on, guys. It's
Right. We'll see what the NDDH has to say. Is that where you're at?
more or less.
Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, so
I just have a real quick question.
yeah, Mr. Santos.
Cindy, I just want to make sure I'm understanding your comment. You just want it to be 14 continuous days or nights annually, just no April 1 through December 31st. I just want to make sure I understand what you're asking.
You're asking me if I wanted to make it 14 continuous days annually?
Yeah, the whole year, no limitation. Is that what you're asking?
No.
Okay.
No.
So that's
I
what
would
it
be
is
asking
now.
for just a seasonal, that people can be there for 2 weeks,
You
just
want
seasonal.
Seasonal. Okay.
Yes, because if you continue it for the 14-day, to December, you're gonna have a situation like I had on Azard Road. And you're, regardless of how you do this regulation, you're still going to have people living in campers in the town of Thompson.
Yeah, that's why I was asking that question.
I don't really know if there's a solution to it,
Yeah.
mainly because of the health department issues.
So as it is now, just for everyone's reference, the current regulations are, as Brian said, 14 days or nights per calendar year. So the proposed regulation are,
Yeah, if you want to keep that, wait, am I on? Yeah, if you want to keep that for calendar year, I don't have a problem with that. So the problem is going to be that people are going to live in trailers, regardless of what your regulation says. And you need, I mean, I have like, I know of definitely one. I believe that there's another one on my desk, and I think someone told me of another one. So that's like 3. And then I heard today that there's a person living on somebody's property that they don't think it's their property. So, you know, it's going to always be a problem, an issue.
That's for sure.
So,
All right, well, we've decided we're going to wait and hear what NDDH has to say. So let's move on to the one that we've got guests in the room for.
excellent. So everyone, we are on page 52, Article 5A, Section 3, Earth and Gravel Removal.
And I am unmuting Madeline and Harry Heller. Actually, Harry, I think you have to unmute yourself. It won't let me do it for some reason.
So the first point comes to sort of the formatting of the section.
Okay. Me again?
Yeah, go ahead.
Sure.
So I just thought that perhaps that when you're opening that section, that you probably should put in that that they have to also comply with Section 3A, Section 4C, which is the site plan. I just think it behooves us to mention that that's what they have to do also, even though engineers, et cetera, know they have to do that. I just think it helps to put that in there. And that's my main. I kind of looked at it again today briefly. Do we have, is processing, screening, and crushing discussed in this? I'm not too sure it is. Maybe somebody else can help me with that answer.
Not really in the proposed draft. That was, again, we took that mostly from what we were given back from the NECOG, and, you know, built off of that for sure. I'm going into the website now to see what the current regs look like for that. Bear with me. Talk amongst yourselves while I'm doing that.
So, okay, I mean, we can take that first point. Is it helpful to cross-reference the article that mentions special permits here in this section? You know, to say something to the effect of, you know, applications for earth and gravel removal require a special permit according to the requirements of Section 3, Article 3. Does that solve your concern about that, Cindy?
Oh yeah. If you just, it needs to comply with Article 3A, Section 4C. Yes. In addition to the following, it needs to comply. You know, somehow do that wording.
So I'm in the existing regulations right now. Again, this is existing, not proposed. There is no separate. Oh, here we go. We do have one item related to processing. It's letter E under the existing, with a couple of subsections. Some of which wouldn't apply because of the way they're phrased, but it does refer to it more directly than the proposed draft.
I think you do need to mention processing, screening, and crushing, and also
yeah, I can
dynamite.
I can pull that in.
Yeah.
I can pull that in. So that looks more like an oversight than in anything else. So that's easy to fix. So unless the commission is aware of a particular deficit in the existing regulations, I'll I'll carry it over as closely as our format allows.
Mr. Rice?
It's just that there's a separation distance from when you're screening also. I think the rock crushing, I think we have allowed that, but there again,
I can read to you exactly what the whole existing regulation says.
yeah, there should be
No
a
equipment
distance.
used for the processing of excavated materials such as a crusher or grader shall be located closer than 1,000 feet to any structure used for residential purposes. The crushing of earth products with permanently installed machinery shall be permitted only in industrial districts. Obviously, that is a change in terms of language and format. Portable crushing plants may be allowed in all districts in association with specific site development earthwork. And then as sub-items, screening may be accomplished at a valid excavation site in a residential and/or commercial district when the following conditions are met. The processing screening equipment shall be portable and self-contained. The processing screening activity shall not generate, cause, or allow continuous noise measurements in excess of noise levels as follows, and then there's some decibel levels. These standards may be exceeded when the adjacent uses are considered by the Commission to be more intense and maintain higher noise thresholds. The processing screening activity shall take place only between 7 a.m. and 5 p.m., no processing on Saturdays, Sundays, or holidays. Only material excavated and unearthed at a site in accordance with a valid excavation permit shall be permitted to be processed, screened on said site. So unless there's a specific deficit in that, and the Commission is happy with that, I'll carry it over.
I'm John Rice. I'm for leaving that in there because I think it's been controlled pretty well in the past.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's good and clear and
Okay.
aligned with that.
Easy peasy.
I have a question.
Mr. Santos.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. Leaving that in. I'm just reading through, I think it's Madeline Smith's comments here. So I guess I'll pose an informal question. We have renewal permits, and I think, Tira, we say renewal every year, right? Which was taken from the last regulations.
Correct.
That's gone back and forth a couple of times. At one point, it had been suggested to bash it down to every 6 months, but we backed away from that.
Yeah, no, I remember talking about that. All right, so it sounds like we're going to stick with the 1 year, but my question is, regardless of renewal permits, is there anything written about when when you start a project, it has to be over in a period of time or an agreed to period of time? Like I'm seeing some of these operations go on for years, and I don't know enough about how we control that. I don't know if that was ever talked about in any previous meetings, or can somebody help me understand how we control the durations of things?
Well, I think under the present regulations, the old regulations, you can renew it every year for as long as you want it. There was no limit on how many renewals you could have.
I guess my question is, should we?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I think my understanding in conversations I've had in meetings that it seems like some of it is the assumption that they're going to want their bond back sooner rather than later, and that's sort of been the
That would make
carrot
sense.
approach rather than a stick, I guess.
That would make sense, but some of these things go on for a long time.
For sure.
I don't know if that's fair to the town, and I'm posing it as a question to the group. I'm not trying to run anyone over. I'm just asking the question.
Brian, I would have a comment on that. I think the averages have, from my experience, probably after, most of them like to get, one depends on the acreage. If it's say 2 acres, that could last up to say 5 years. I think we should have something get some opinions on the size of the lot that's to be excavated. If it's an acre or so, that could be completed in 2 years. I mean, we could make it in our regulations that after the second period with X amount of acreage, the commission should have some idea on their second year of renewal, how many more years or months this activity is going to, just to give the CEO a heads up on the duration of the mining operation.
Sure.
Bob Wirch, it's going to be difficult to put a time frame on how many renewals are appropriate or not appropriate, because gravel is a commercial item, and it is really regulated by demand. If there's no demand, and you have a gravel permit for 50,000 yards of gravel, and all of a sudden there's no demand, but can you foresee that in another year or 2 years, or depending on how long there's a lack of demand? It's a pretty tricky call.
Sure. So if I can, Joe, maybe after the first year renewal that there's an agreed to schedule, at least so we can understand how long that operation is going to be upon the first renewal.
I don't agree, because you can't know what the demand for gravel is.
Yeah.
Knowing what the demand for any product is.
Could I just say something, Carolyn?
Go ahead, Carolyn.
Why not on the original application, ask the applicant how long they expect to be gravel mining, how long the whole project is going to take, and why can't we anticipate that, except for extenuating circumstances, that it should only take that long? I was thinking something very similar, Carolyn, although maybe something with a little more guideline in terms of exceptional periods, like as a part of the site plan with the description of the phases, an anticipated schedule, and then perhaps articulating that, the renewals cannot exceed 2 times the anticipated schedule, or some finite sense to accommodate for the fact that you may have periods of sharp economic downturn where construction halts for a long period of time, which is unanticipated. So that's sort of what strikes me as being a reasonable way to phrase it.
And Ms. Smith?
Joe, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So just kind of weigh in on everything that's going on as far as this goes. I agree, the market demand is kind of one of the factors that plays into this. I believe at most meetings, I know in other towns, we do try and give the commission a timeline, and that's kind of what the renewals are for too, to see, where we are progressing as far as the project. One of the things I would just encourage you to consider is a lot of times these projects will span over several parcels. So it may seem like a permit's been open for a long time, but it's actually moved from like a parcel to another parcel. And so that's just something to consider. I know some of our projects started out as maybe a couple acres and then they just expanded. And so it seems like, they've been going on forever, but in actuality, the newer permits are newer, and the other permits are restored areas that just happen to be near what's going on.
Thank you. Mr. Rice?
My thing is that when they come in for a renewal, then we have 10 people that would decide whether the renewal is warranted or not. And maybe at that time you could discuss with that. But to Ms. Smith's comment right there, maybe which we don't on the initial application, is to when they finish one phase, that's the situation we're in right now currently, is that they would have to reclaim that phase unless the traffic and the withdrawal of material is coming through that specific area. In other words, you don't want to reclaim it, grass it, and have trucks and machinery running it over. I'm just not in favor of putting in that a specific amount of time. To Bob's point, is that depends on the demand of the material and the weather. You know, it's not always conducive for these people to operate machinery.
So John, you would favor phased reclamation over defined project limits?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
My
Mr.
choice.
Chairman,
Mr. Santos?
I can understand that, but in the case of Mrs. Smith's client, they've done a good job with outlining, what their intent is. And I feel like our regulations should show some sort of control, or at least request that control to understand it better. I don't think that's unfair to be asking for that sort of data. I know Ricky DeRosiers just gave us a timeline, and that was good. And I know Rawson and Strategic Realty have been doing the same thing. I just want it to be more consistent throughout to have that control. That's all I'm asking for.
And I believe on the original application, as Carolyn has said, giving some idea how many years or how many months that the process will, that would help, again, not only the public, but also the CEO, some idea what this project is going to entail.
I agree.
Bob, works, but are we going to require the applicant to stick with an estimate? If I estimate that I'll get all the gravel off a site in 2 years, and after 2 years, I've gotten half the gravel out, now what happens?
If I can,
Mr. Santos?
just to answer, Bob, upon that renewal of the following year, we could at least ask the question of what's going on, get a little bit more information, and then make another decision on how we want to approach that.
Right. So I think we have to leave it at an arbitrary time, the total completion of the gravel operation, and take it year to year, permit to permit, renewal to renewal.
Is this something that can be solved by having that as information on the application, as several people have said? It's not something that's in our regulations because it's not potentially going to be a decision maker for us, but it's something that's on the form.
I'm okay with that, the answer. Yeah, it's on the form.
Yeah, if it's on the application and the site plan, it doesn't necessarily have to be relevant to the approval of the plan, but if we articulate it that it is relevant to the renewal process, I think that's probably legit.
I would think you would have to put that in the regulations if you're going to put it on the application. I don't know, maybe.
Well, yes, we would if we're going to require it. But
well, I think we could require it as an estimate, but not where otherwise you're going to have all kinds of, well, you gave it to him, you gave him another year, but you didn't give me another year. You know what I mean? So I think we can't cut it in stone, the limits of how long you can do gravel.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm saying that. I want to be able to tell the public that we're asking for and have an understanding of how long things are going to happen, and that we can weigh in on that decision.
I agree, as an approximation, but not definitive.
That's
we
fine.
We can't say after 2 years of renewal, you're out of here. We're not going to let you permit it. We're not going to permit any more gravel to be removed.
I don't think that adding the estimate requirement, and effectively a narrative at renewal of some kind, is meant to fundamentally deal with good operators, right? It's to deal with the operator who doesn't come in for his renewal, or who comes in and doesn't really have the answers. If that background work isn't done and they can't provide I gave you this estimate, but it's going to take twice as long because we had an economic crash, or, whatever it is, a monsoon, if that background work isn't done, that's the red flag for the commission that, maybe you should start looking at not having those renewals. So having the estimate.
I agree.
Get an estimate. I
John.
got an estimate. Right.
John Rice, Joe,
Mr. Rice?
I just, the application form I'm good with. I just don't want it noted on the site plan because upon renewal, it's very difficult if we approve something that's on the site plan originally is to change it upon renewal.
Okay, that's a fair point.
I
Attorney
agree.
Smith?
I believe, just as a side note, I believe when we do the renewals, you do ask for an estimate of how many cubic yards will be removed in that calendar year or that renewal year. So I think that could kind of help you with timeline. That might just be a clarification of this many yards relates to this many months. But I don't see why, like Mr. Rice said, you can ask for an estimate, recognizing, you know, there are definitely outside factors that could play a role. And then as far as renewals go, I mean, under the law, you have to renew so long as they're in accordance with your conditions. But if you find that they're falling behind and the reason is they're not keeping up with their permit conditions, then you certainly have a reason to stop it.
Thanks, Madeline.
Okay, so is that, have we reached an understanding? Are we able?
Yep.
What is the understanding? I'd like it clear.
Yeah, thank you, Bob.
So what I bought.
On the application, I'd like to see a request for a
correct,
duration.
yeah.
That's it.
Okay.
What?
Estimated time.
Estimated time, right.
Estimated time, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so to the point of, I think one of Cindy's first concerns can be remedied by where it's in section C, section 3C, where it says standards for earth removal. That subsection begins, the removal of earth materials under this section shall require a special permit from the commission and shall comply with the following standards. If we just cross-reference the special permit section in there, I think that's an easy
Yes.
fix.
Yes.
And then we get to the point or the question about if there should be a separate subsection for renewals, which I think would be wise.
I agree.
Yeah, so I think that, Attorney Smith had pointed out that she thought it was unclear what the permit period was. So we can make that clear in the renewal section. We could also take numbers, I'm looking at numbers 11 and 14 on page 54 would be in that section. I think number 12 speaks to both the original application and the renewal. So we might have to split those out to the different subsections. Is there anyone who thinks a specific subsection D for a renewal is a bad idea? Okay, so I think we can move forward with that. Tira,
Do you think there should be a separate section on bonding?
How far do you go?
Before we get to that, I'll address that next, Cindy.
Okay.
Tira, do you need more specific guidance from us on what that subsection D looks like?
Who are you asking?
No,
Tira.
no, I think I'm good.
Okay.
We'll find out if you guys hate it. I think I'm good.
And then the next question from Cindy is, should there be a second subsection, another subsection for bonding?
What page are you on, Joe?
This is page
We're
54
still
of
on
the
52.
draft. It is page, I don't know, the second or third page of the discussion, fourth page of the discussion guide.
You on page 54, Joe?
Well,
Yeah, we're in that section of,
Okay.
it spans 52 to 54. I'm not sure if, I think bonding needs to be a separate subsection, but if anyone disagrees with me, I'd
it's sort of
certainly,
just thrown in there, and the same thing with fees. It's sort of just thrown in. It's like, you know, if you had something titled bonding, something titled fees, so it's just easy to go to. That's what I'm seeing organized.
I mean, I have no objection to breaking it out like that into the steps. You know, there's a certain clarity to it.
Providing it stays in that section though, right?
And the earth and, yeah, earth removal, yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about. It's just a
Okay.
section on earth and gravel removal.
Yeah.
Once you're going to bonding, then somebody else.
Ellie, you fell
somebody
off
got-
the couch.
so it would be like section E, for example, bonding.
Well, however the letters would work out once
Yeah.
Right.
it was reinserted. Yeah, I think that we've covered most of the points under that first item on this section. Oh, good. It only took us 20 minutes.
So on page 52, everyone, we're on page 52 of the proposed draft regulation. This is the beginning of Article 5A, Section 3 on earth and gravel removal. Subsection A, which talks about intent, and A1 is protection of environmental resources, including but not limited to. And there are 5 items under that subsection.
Joe, are you on page 52, Article 5A, Section 3? That it,
5, yes,
A intent,
exactly, yep.
which is saying the protection of environmental resources included but not limited to. What if somebody, again, I'm looking at that D and I have a problem with that as usual. Protection of wildlife habitat.
Yeah,
You know,
Cindy and Attorney Smith, I think, and Tira are all, I think, in agreement in favor of striking that subsection,
yeah,
section D.
somebody's always going to have a concern about a left-handed toad in there or something. I don't know. And how do you? I think the controlling erosion and hydrological stability, I think we can address that. But
Yeah,
I would definitely strike that D.
Yeah, I think we arrived when we discussed the special permit criteria and at a good compromise for that in terms of, you know, having available information passed to us, but not using it as a specific criteria for approval or denial. I think that was the compromise we arrived at. But yes, in the context of this section, I would agree to strike that. I don't think we need to discuss that further. That makes it more consistent with choices we've already made.
Okay. Is it my understanding that when I look at that, it's an intent, but, you know, not necessarily have to do all this stuff, is that we can actually look at each item, you know,
Well, that's more the case in the description of the special permit criteria. That is a little more phrased in a discretionary fashion. The specific intent of why we are regulating gravel and earth extraction, I think, is less philosophical and more material. It's because there are potential consequences that are specific to the act of excavation, and these are the specific physical effects that we want to mitigate.
Okay, I'd have to go back and everything, but I think just as long as you're using the term may instead of shall and leave it up to the commission in all these areas.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So as for, there are some questions about items A and C. So A is maintaining an adequate supply and quality of surface and underground water. Attorney Smith's opinion is that adequate is subjective, and would like to see something more objective. Tira has suggested that if we agree with that reasoning, maintain the supply and quality of surface and underground water, may be less subjective.
But how do you do that, Joe? Maintain an adequate supply? Is that, I think by maintaining whatever number we use, 6 or 8 feet above the groundwater level would be, as long as we have that in there, I think probably we could strike that A. Because somebody's gonna say, how much water is in the ground and you brought it down 6 inches or 2 inches, you gotta bring that water back up. And you're having a drought like we are, that water ain't coming back up.
Okay.
So what I've suggested there is that the whole reason that we have these regulations specific to these is that, again, they have some consequences. So while I understand Madeline's point about, the idea of adequacy being subjective, I would suggest that we are describing the circumstances under which we believe that adequacy is maintained and that these are the standards. So it's that the regulations which are more fully described, or hopefully fully described, create the conditions which would maintain the adequate supply of surface and groundwater. That would be how I would interpret that, the purpose of having that. It's saying that we have a reason for doing what we're doing.
May I say something?
Sure.
Mr. Heller?
Hi, good evening. I had a little trouble with my computer, but I'm here now. I'm on an iPad this evening instead of a computer, and I'm somewhat challenged by the technology. I think the concern here is not adequacy, because adequacy can be dependent on a number of factors, only one of which may be the excavation. I think what you should be concerned about is that the excavation does not materially adversely impact either water supply or water quality. So I think we're probably trying to get to the same place, but if we crafted the language based on a material adverse impact to either water supply or water quality, I feel that may be a better standard, because that ties in directly with the excavation itself.
So what are you suggesting as a hypothetical then? When you say to address it as a potential adverse impact?
Well, that's an ascertainable standard that a hydrogeologist can determine whether or not there's any material impact to groundwater supply or groundwater quality as a result of the excavation.
Tira, it could be as simple as replacing maintaining an adequate with preventing a material adverse effect on the.
I agree. I think that does it exactly.
Materially adverse. Okay.
Yeah, that's my point.
Preventing materially adverse effects
On the supply and quality of surface and underground water.
Yeah.
I'm down with that.
It's the same intent.
John Rice, I think the term adequate, what's adequate for you and what's adequate for me, I need to.
Yep, so we just axed it, John.
Yeah, all right.
We don't have adequate anymore. It's gone.
Okay, good. Just
for you, John. I'm looking to make sure I don't miss any. C, D, A, B. Okay, so that was A. C. Cindy and Attorney Smith raised questions about Section C, protection of hydrological stability and control of flooding and erosion. Claiming that perhaps, it's commission overreach. Tira's response is that there's language that specifically addresses the intent of the Planning and Zoning Commission to mitigate the impacts to the hydrologic system and reduce or prevent flooding. And the wetlands agent hasn't raised any concerns about commission overreach to those sections.
Again,
Yeah, I mean, we've got quite a bit of language in there that, outside the gravel section, which is quite specific to those issues. And in fact, some of that stuff, well, the LID section is apparently a requirement of the MS4 permit. So, if sections that address these issues are required under other contexts, then it implies to me that it is within the boundaries of the commission to put regulations in place to protect those assets or interests.
If I may, again, Harry Heller, I think the change that we made to A addresses the protection of hydrologic stability. Clearly, I don't disagree that all of this, both in A and C, is within your enabling legislation to regulate. But I think you've covered the first part of that in A, and I would suggest that you modify C to incorporate language to ensure that the proposed project doesn't create flooding or erosion.
Okay, I have this nagging feeling that we had language closer to that at one point, and it may have been changed at the suggestion of the wetlands agent, but I could be wrong about that. But you think something more in character of preventing material adverse effects too?
Yeah, anything that would exacerbate erosion or contribute to a flooding situation. It's certainly
if the commission if the commission prefers the language be phrased that way, I'm okay with it. I'm a little more ambivalent about changing C based on the comments I made earlier. I'm not totally convinced of this line of reasoning, but I don't think it's an unreasonable argument.
Yeah,
I'm not sure that I disagree with affirming protection of those items, but it's the commission's call, not mine.
Mr. Santos?
Yeah, I'll just comment. I'm not disagreeing with Attorney Heller that there might be a little bit of double dipping now with A and C in that word hydrological study, but I do like the way C is written just in general and would prefer to keep it as written like that for C.
I tend to agree with Mr. Santos.
I agree, Mr. Chairman.
I'll disagree to be different. I prefer maintain an EA. This is what the Attorney Heller said. I think we're getting nitpicky. Because the more variations of protecting, the site is the more questions that's going to be developed. So if we try to make it uniform with A and C, then I think there's less controversy at our meetings.
The rationale behind my comment is that I'm not sure what hydrological stability means.
Well, we're all expert on the commission. That's why we understand that.
You want me to Google it now?
I think we
No,
all,
no,
I think we
I'll
all
talk
stayed
to
at
Marla. I'm just
Holiday
going to
Inn
talk to
Express
Marla.
last night.
Okay, so
I'm just going to talk to Marla about that. But we agree that we should be concerned with control of flooding and erosion, I believe.
yeah,
Without question.
yeah, no one's
No
questioning
one's
that.
denying that, yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
I'm
so
going to
you'll-
talk to Marla about hydrological stability and what it means in this context. I think you guys can move on from there. We'll leave that a little bit open, but on A, I've got the edit. We're going to strike D.
Great. So now we move to numbers 2 and 3, still in section A, intent. So the first question is,
The first question just has a one-word answer. The answer is yes.
Yeah,
Number
yeah.
2 does address the protection of the future use of the parcel, and number 3 is for surrounding properties. So
Correct,
that's
yeah.
just a one-word answer.
and then the next question is on, do we want to, in this section on intent, acknowledge that these operations are temporary in nature? I think that's in response to Attorney Smith's comment. So that's the, do we need to make it clear? Do we need to articulate explicitly that the commission understands these operations to be temporary?
Yeah, it's another one where I didn't have super strong feelings, but it seemed awkward to me, which may just be a flaw in my thinking about it.
No, not you.
Hey, it's happened. I've got 10 fingers for mistakes, and I've only used a couple. Following protection. I mean, I just don't know that it is necessary to refer to the temporary nature of them. I don't necessarily object to it either.
It seems implicit.
I don't know, Madeline, what did you have in mind there, really?
That may have been, Harry, I think that may have been one of your comments. Let me just read it through again.
Now, where is this word temporary? I'm trying to find.
That's the issue. It's not there, Brian. So the comment was, the commission obviously is allowed to condition in order to protect property values, but the commission should also be required to give due consideration to the town's plan of development and the temporary nature of an excavation project.
Okay.
No, I think that one was yours, Madeline. That wasn't one of mine.
Yeah, let me pull it on my actual.
So while you're looking, Attorney Smith, I just think, so number 2, which speaks about the property value. So number 2 and 3 both speak about property values, 2 for the parcel itself and 3 for the neighboring properties. I certainly think the temporary nature of a gravel operation is more implicit in number 2.
I think I
Okay.
found a comment, and I think it actually was referring to number 3. So in number 3, you're talking about protecting the values and usefulness of the neighboring properties, but our thought was being sure to give due respect to the fact that this is not a long-term hindrance on these properties. It's going to be short-term in nature. They're temporary in nature. There's a finite amount of material on the site. So eventually it will stop. So yes, it may cause some changes in value depending upon who you are, if you have issues with it, but it may not necessarily be a long-term effect on the property value.
Yeah, okay, so I understand your point, Madeline, but I don't I don't, I don't think it would be beneficial for the commission to essentially state that they're okay with accepting a degradation in property value, even if it is temporary, but which I know isn't exactly the point you're trying to make, but that's sort of the way it effectively, I think, would read if we were to reference that there. I mean, the temporary nature of the thing is, again, gets described in the application and in the renewal process. I think it creates an atmosphere or an implication of favoring a developer over existing property owners, where we want to have that more as a balance idea.
Understood. And honestly, when it would get to that point, the commission would likely look to get an appraisal done, and you'd have a qualified professional come in and they would take into consideration the temporary nature of the project on the long-term value of the property. So it'll.
Yeah, I just think it's an awkward thing to reference it there in that context, because again, we're in what is the intent of the commission, and this is specifically talking about impacts on properties. Yeah. So I think I would stay away from that. And I know you've got the discussion guide there, Madeline, as to your comment on usefulness and subjectivity. So that was very specifically retained as a less subjective term than the term enjoyment, which I think we all agreed was a hideous kettle of worms, unprovable, infinitely able to be litigated, whereas usefulness, again, kind of like with the appraisal, has some standard that you can achieve.
Yeah, based on your comments of, the pool example, that makes sense.
Again, Harry,
so
Helen,
we can move on.
I think under your general evaluation criteria for all special permits in your town, you have the ability to consider these things anyways.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so the next, so now we're in section B, exemptions. And there is the phrase significant grade changes. This is, I think in the first, B1. And again, another question about ambiguity, subjectivity, and identifiable standards. And I agree with Tira's comment that those with greater experience in construction might be able to give us an identifiable standard about what a significant grade change would be. That would be beneficial to pop into our regulation here.
John Rice.
Mr. Rice.
Am I still, okay. Don't we have grading percentages in our current regulations? In other words, certain percentage.
I will take a look.
From the road, And I think I thought we addressed that in our current regulations.
I am looking.
Again, the term, it's always the term of significant.
Right.
What you think is significant, what I think is.
Sure. I agree, John.
Yeah, I agree with the principle. It's just, what are we sticking in there? And I'm looking at the section on graveling right now, but I don't.
So while Tira's looking for
that,
it should be grading.
I'll also point out that Attorney Smith made the same comment about duration. And this, I guess, gets a little bit to what Brian had brought up earlier. But this is separate. This is different. This is for, is there a duration of the project that we determine should no longer be exempt from this special permitting process? And I think. So
I found the section on grading. So when earthwork operations are completed, the site shall be graded so that slopes in the disturbed area shall not exceed 1 foot vertical to 3 feet horizontal. The commission may require lesser slopes if the disturbed area is planned for future residential, commercial, industrial use, or I guess that should be planned for any use. Right. But yes, I have it here. So that's, are those reasonable standards generally, fairly standard standards?
Tara, doesn't it go on in some area, journey excavation about from how, from the roadway, town roadway, et cetera, et cetera? You're making me get up and go get my book.
No, I'm not making you get up to get your book.
I think this is a different.
I can scroll faster than you can walk.
I think this is a different discussion, though. This is a discussion about whether or not an excavation permit should be required, even though the real application before the commission is some time of a development initiative other than excavation. And, you know, sometimes it's a fine line, but I'll leave it to the experts on what should replace a significant grade change. But my feeling is that if the site development cannot occur in a period less than a year, that's probably something that the commission should consider as requiring an excavation permit, just because of the longer term impacts it may have.
And further, Tara, under your exempt operations under the current regulations, I believe it says it's not more than 3,000 cubic yards. So they're talking about a quantity of material that's going to be removed.
In relationship to this, to what we're discussing now, you're talking about in terms of the duration or amount removed.
Right, because as Harry was saying, you know, we're talking about an exemption from having to come get an excavation permit in accordance with building. So if you're just kind of grading a small area to put a shed and it's going to take you a week, you probably don't need an excavation permit for that.
Okay.
Yeah, if I can.
Mr. Santos?
Yeah, I agree with Attorney Heller and Smith are saying. Terry, just to answer your question, the 1 in 3 right now is with the safe grade will be left as like an OSHA compliance thing, right? So,
Right. Yes.
But I agree with Attorney Heller that maybe a duration is good, but I think Attorney Smith has come up with, I think significant grade change. I think we should consider putting in parentheses there a certain amount of cubic yardage would classify a significant grade change. I think I'm kind of relating 2 different things there, but I think that's the only way to like make this work. Because yeah, the word significant it's not going to work. So.
Okay, I think I have that then. I think I've got this for an edit.
Okay, Attorney Smith?
Yeah, and if you're talking about grade, just to kind of elaborate on Mr. Santos's point, you know, you want to be talking about a certain amount of cubic yards over a certain area.
Time, yeah, an area, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
And again, Harry Heller, I think what you need to consider is material being imported to or exported from the site. I mean, we had a commercial site in another town where we moved about 300,000 yards of material, balancing a cut and fill to make an area for commercial development, but no material was imported, no material was exported. Yeah. That shouldn't require an excavation permit.
Yeah.
I think it all depends on the use of the land. What is the intent use of the land afterwards?
I agree.
We already have, Harry, we've already stated that there is exemption for approved building permit work in there. So unless I misunderstand your point.
But the intent could be anything, from building houses to building an airport, you know? don't see how you can pin it down.
I'm pretty sure I've got the edit here, guys.
Great.
We'll find out.
Well, just one last comment on this one. Again, I think Attorney Heller brings up a good point that some sites require 50,000 cubic yards of pure import, no excavation at all, right? To make a grading plan, so I think we just gotta figure out what to put after significant grade changes.
Brian, since you've got the most construction management experience here, I'm going to write something up and just pass it back to you tomorrow, okay? And just let me know if it makes sense once I put it back together.
Okay.
Great, thank you. Same section. Number 3 is excavation, removal, filling, or grading of a total amount of up to 1,500 cubic yards. That is a change from our current regulations, from 3,000 to 1,500.
Why?
Our comments ranged from 1,500 is way too much to why are we changing it from 3,000 to 1,500? Cindy.
Yeah, I don't understand that, if 3,000 worked for all these years, why are we changing it, to less? I don't get it.
Well, I think
what's the rationale behind it?
I think the commission felt that it was high. It was a lot of excavation for to not come for a special permit. I think that was the rationale. It's a lot of land.
1,500 cubic yards. I mean, it's nothing compared to what we have going on now. 3,000.
Right. I think that's exactly the point, Cindy. Is that there was a desire to reduce the amount of excavation that is not required to come for a permit.
So can I ask Madeline or Harry a question?
Sure.
What is it in other towns? Do you know?
It's all over the place. I've seen it as low as 500. I don't know. I've seen it 3,000 anywhere, but certainly 1,500 in a number of towns. Yeah. But in almost every town, it's on a per year basis. Mm-hmm. And let me just throw something out there from a practical perspective. This is not something that's going to impact any excavation operator. But it may, and I don't know how much agriculture and farming you have in your town, but it does have the potential to impact your farmers, because a lot of farmers supplement their income by selling a little gravel here and there. And that's why in a number of towns that I work in where agriculture is an important part of their industry, they do it, consider it on a per year basis, so they don't adversely impact their farmers.
So thank you. As Attorney Heller alludes to one of the other point Attorney Smith made, as it reads now, it simply says a total amount up to 1,500 cubic yards. And the question was to us, do we mean 1,500 cubic yards a year, or do we mean 1,500 cubic yards total?
Random.
I'll also point out that we do have an exception for agricultural use, an exemption for agricultural use.
Yes.
Joe, I think to move it on, I'm in favor of putting it to 1,500.
A year or total?
Per year.
And Alvin, you said per year as well?
I'll agree with John, with Mr. Rice on that as well.
Okay. I will fix that.
Great.
Brian, just a note, you don't have to raise your hand every time you want to speak.
It is, the teacher in me appreciates it though, John. I'm not gonna lie.
So I take it.
There it is.
I take it none of you are going to are pushing to keep it at 3,000.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, I'm just my comment is just creates more work.
We can have Joe go around the table here.
It just creates more work.
Is there anyone who feels that 3,000 should stay the standard? 3,000 cubic feet. Yards, sorry.
Yard.
It's a big difference. 3,000 cubic yards. I hear no one advocating for 3,000 cubic yards, so we will reduce it to 1,500 cubic yards per year. Okay, section C, standards for earth removal. Okay.
Yeah, that's an edit I can make.
Yeah.
Pass on that one.
And then the same one, okay. Okay, so we're on page 53 of the proposed drafts. We're still in that same section. This is it's actually right at in the draft I'm looking at, it's right at the bottom of page 52. It's section C, standards for earth removal, 2 buffer areas, subsection E, the location of the fuel pad. Cindy,
I have no idea. I have no idea why I put that in there. My only excuse is this was the last piece of the regulations I reviewed, and I was probably just tired. Could have been a mistake. I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, so you think that was a mistake, Cindy? Because I kind of thought it might be a mistake too.
Yeah. I'm reading
Okay.
this and going, oh, why did I do that? So
Okay, move on.
Subsection 3, no commission action required. Wait, this is about earthen berms instead of evergreen vegetation.
Joe, I'm sorry, I had to jump off of this stupid phone, but on the location of the fuel pad,
yeah,
why do we need a fuel pad? In that, I don't know, every time they refuel equipment, it's that type of thing, I think they have a fuel pad spill kit with them. I happened to go by the excavation today, going to my sister's in that fuel pad that's at the end of Spicer Road. I don't know, they're gonna have to dig that up once they finish that process. I don't know, I like to have the commission's comment on fuel pad. I think that technology today is that, the truck comes in and they pump in the amount of fuel in each piece of machinery there. They move, well, whatever. I don't think it's necessary, personally.
It's a different issue though, John. The issue on that item and striking it was not whether fuel pads should or should not be included. It's whether if there is a fuel pad, it should be allowed in the buffer area. So that was the mistake. Cindy's strike implied that was not a necessary thing to list out when we had listed everything else out. But the issue of whether to require a fuel pad is a separate one, and that's not what that particular comment was addressing.
Mr.
Okay,
Chairman?
so you're saying the fuel pad, you can't have a fuel pad in the buffer area, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
That's
All right.
what that is saying, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't read the first part of it.
Mr. Lenke?
Mr. Rice kind of handled it, but
Okay.
the idea behind the fuel pad was to keep, when they're fueling, is to have some place to contain the fuel. If there ever was a little bit of a overflow sometimes on the fuel tank or putting oil in a machine. A lot of job sites that I have been on in the last 5 to 10 years, they've been using these special pads that they slide under the machine, do what they got to do, fuel, whatever. They pull it out, wrap it up, put it back in the truck and leave. So you got nothing on the ground, or you got no asphalt or whatever. That's the newer technology, if you want to put it.
They carry on a spill kit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
depends. Spill kit is a little bit different. Same thing.
Okay. So the next item is still in standards for earth removal. This is number 7 on page 53. Unless otherwise approved by the commission, the maximum depth of excavation shall be no greater than 10 feet below the grade of the street along which the property has frontage, or if there is no street frontage, no greater than 10 feet below the grade of the property line through which access is provided, and no closer than 8 feet to the maximum groundwater level on the property, except in locations where permanent ponds are proposed as part of the excavation plan. Attorney Smith says that that as long as good engineering is practiced, it should only be the final grade that concerns us, as opposed to the maximum depth of excavation. Final grade should be. And then there's also a question about, 10 feet from the 10 feet, 100 feet from the street line, if the property has frontage. And then she says that if there is no frontage, it should be a site-by-site basis. So those are 3 items for us to discuss.
Yeah, Brian, I'm going right back to you on this one.
Yeah, I'm trying to make
Does
sure.
this make sense to you?
No, I'm rereading it as many times as I can, as quick as I can here.
If I may,
Attorney Heller?
I think what Attorney Smith was getting at is effectively this regulation as written eliminates excavations. Because if you have a 100-acre site and you can only excavate to a depth 10 feet below the road grade, probably 3 or 4 feet in many areas is either your topsoil or your subsoil. So that virtually eliminates the ability to excavate any structural material. I think what the commission's concern here should be is how it impacts the future utility of the site after the excavation is completed. And that's why she suggested that the change of grade cannot be more than 10 feet within 100 feet of the road line or the property line, whichever one is applicable. But obviously, if you're going to allow excavation in your town, you have to allow a lot deeper than 10 feet of excavation. And the other thing I'd point out is, I don't know where the 8 feet above groundwater comes from, but in most towns, the regulation does not allow you to excavate to a depth, unless you're creating a pond, and that's a different application, but does not allow you to excavate to a depth which would render the site unsuitable for the future installation of on-site septic systems. And under the public health code, you have to have virgin soil a minimum of 2 feet above seasonally high groundwater. I've seen a lot of towns, particularly up in the northeast portion of the state, where they have 5 feet above seasonally high groundwater, but I've never seen 8 feet before.
I'm gonna, that is in the next comment, and I think we separated I think Tira separated those out because there's probably gonna be a lot of discussion about that one specifically, based on recent feedback from members of our community. So I appreciate that. We'll talk about the groundwater level requirement next.
Tara, where did A and B come from?
I'm just certain that I carried that over from the NECOG draft, because I wouldn't be personally qualified to draft language of this nature. So it's either straight out of the NECOG draft or it's cobbled together from the two, our existing, the draft. With some of these things, I was looking at guidance documents, not as much in this area as in some of the others. So, I can't answer the question as to why some of this language is the way it is, because we're well out of my wheelhouse here. That's why I'm looking to you, brother.
Yeah. I don't disagree with Attorney Heller saying that, if it was A, there possibly could be no excavation that could be done on a particular piece of property. I don't know. I don't think we're going to be able to whip something up on this one right now. That's for sure. I think this requires.
So Brian, I'll include this on something. I'll pass back and forth with you. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, great. Excellent. And then we'll move on then to C, which is the groundwater level distance. So we've heard from Attorney Heller on that. You know, I think we set 8 feet, knowing that this is a sticking point for a lot of people here in town.
And also it is what is currently in your regulations. So in this case, it would be an instance of consistency with our past standards.
I think we need to do that. Just keep it consistent.
But when, Joe, when they did this years ago, I just don't know who was coming up with these numbers, as in a lot of things that's in our current regulations. I question that a lot of times. But if the purpose of future use of that land, say if it is a subdivision, and what Mr. Heller just indicated, that NDDH says 2 feet, I would suggest let's go to 5.
Yeah, Attorney Smith?
You know, I don't know, Tira, if you want to look at, we had done kind of a red line on that section. Some of it may be helpful just to kind of make the comments make a little bit more sense. But we had suggested no closer than 5 feet to maximum groundwater level as part of the final grades. I know with the last application we had on 363, and Mr. Held had pointed out that in the past there had been other sites where they were allowed to excavate the water table as long as they backfilled it up to a certain, to whatever that distance above the groundwater needed to be. And so we had just asked for clarification on that as well.
Gotcha. So that's I
don't know. I mean, I would say that you're looking at more than factual information here, as we know, and I think we can be frank about this in this discussion.
Yep.
You know, we have some strong resistance, and in as far as an accommodation can be made that actually isn't making a change to be less permissive, but is consistent with the level of permission that we've given. I fundamentally think that that's a compromise. And if you want to call that a political compromise, I will accept that as an observation. You know, and it's not up to me, obviously it is up to the commission, but I think that it will potentially damage the ability to get these regulations through easily.
I agree.
I mean, that's just my feeling. You know, I will accept the label of subjectivity or politicalness on this one, but I just think it's a wiser choice. And I hear you, Madeline. I do.
Joe, by the same token.
Go ahead. Hold on.
Go ahead, John. Go ahead, John. No, go ahead, John.
Oh, you want me to raise my hand?
Yeah, raise your hand, pal.
Mr. Rice.
The process we're in is looking at changes in the regulation. Okay, and I put if we say if we went down to 5 feet, and then when we have the public hearing, if we have a large outcry, we can always revert back to the suggestions of the public hearing.
Mr. Santos?
I don't disagree with Mr. Rice, but I also think that, you know, the political answer right now, and given the controversy over the 8 feet, I think we need to maintain the 8 feet. Plus, in addition, I think it's worked over the years. It's not like it's not working or not allowing gravel mining operations to continue. So I say let's just keep it at the 8 feet.
Joe, if I may, in response.
Mr. Rice?
Brian, other than the political part of it, from the construction person that you say and the involvement that you have with all of this stuff and developments, would it be adequate for that 5 feet to be sufficient to put homes and septic systems, et cetera, et cetera?
I don't see why not. I know in my construction operations, I do a significant amount of dewatering and lowering of water tables to create our buildings. But I think in this particular regard, I think we still need to maintain it at 8 feet. But I don't disagree with you that it is adequate to build a building and have 5 feet of cover. I mean, there's no doubt about it.
I suggest we take a vote on this. I'll move that we vote either 8 feet or 5 feet.
Subject to.
Would somebody like to second that?
Okay. Okay, I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Rice.
And
Thank you,
open-
Mr. Rice. It's awful being out there with
He didn't, Joe, point of order, he didn't raise his hand to second that.
Motion has been made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion, Mr. Rice?
Yeah. But, you know, like I mentioned before, just subject to public input at the public hearing, which we can change.
Yeah, my thing with that, John, is that that it just adds more time, John.
Yeah.
You know, I think we've been, you know, I think we can almost guarantee that this will be an issue, that it'll be an issue that is made noisily. It'll be an issue that is used to say that the commission doesn't listen to the members, you know, the residents of the town of Thompson. And it's going to set us back.
But I think it's a small faction of the people in the town of Thompson, right?
Exactly. Thank you.
It's
Exactly.
a small, active.
Why should we run this commission based on a couple of people out there in East Thompson that are just being babies about everything? They're out of line. They're absurd. And if they look at the thing they complained about, that they've been bitching about, the site looks better now than before Rawson started hauling gravel out of there.
And we have asked for their input in this process, and they have shared it.
Right. To my point, when this goes out, I'm hoping that more people get involved at that public hearing when this final document is finished, rather than the not in my backyard people. You know.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Mr. Krogel.
just for my clarification, it was stated that we could go as close as regulations, state regulations say that we can go as close as 2 feet to the water line. Did I hear that properly?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So right now we have this slab in front of us of either at 5 feet, which is 3 feet higher than what we could be, or 8 feet, which is the whole cellar hole. Now we're just talking about gravel permits here, gravel sites at this point, right? Okay.
Yep.
All right, I get my clarification. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion on the motion?
I think Attorney Heller raised his hand.
Well, I really shouldn't speak because you have a motion on the floor and I'm not a commissioner.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I appreciate that. Yeah. Hearing no further discussion, votes are 5 feet or 8 feet. Mr. Santos.
Brian Santos, 8 feet.
Mr. Hill.
Alvin Hill, 8 feet.
Mr. Lanky.
I abstain.
Mr. Krogel.
5 feet.
Mr. Rice.
5 feet.
Mr. Wurge.
8.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
8.
8. And Joseph Brody Brown, 8. So we will keep that at 8 feet. I do, so to the other point that Attorney Smith raised about backfilling, about Tira, have we, I mean, I assume we've eliminated that conflict in these regulations that are in our current regulations?
Well, I can say that the same conflict definitely does not exist because language that specifically contradicts itself was not brought over. If there's a request to add some allowance for backfilling, we can do that, but that's separate, I think.
Gotcha. So that's, I guess, a question for the commission then. So do we want excavation? I guess no. I mean, I guess so as it reads, it says, the maximum depth of excavation shall be no closer than 8 feet to the maximum groundwater level on the property, which would, in my reading, prohibit any excavation below that level.
I believe you are correct, sir. Yes.
And is that how the commission wishes to keep it?
My input, yes. John Rice.
Yes, and I see Mr. Krogel nodding as well.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
Good.
Excellent.
Brian, you raise your hand. Did Brian raise his hand, Joe?
Hey, he's my favorite student. Section 8, in addition to other applicable requirements of this section, removal of earth materials from any property shall also comply with the following standards. Oh yeah, this is a whole thing. When I was reading this, it was challenging for me to wrap my head around what this section was saying.
I think I know what John Filchak was trying to get at, but it is absolutely like cuckoo pants to try to write that intelligently.
So how do we fix it, friends?
How do we fix it?
Look, if I'm reading this right, can we just strike A? I mean, I don't disagree. The natural topography of the project shall be preserved.
I think you can probably strike A, even though I know why I can sense why it was in there. I think it's almost impossible to articulate in a meaningful way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Attorney Smith?
And to accomplish.
I think it seems like the point they're trying to get at is they want it to stay cohesive with the environment. And I think that kind of speaks to the points we were discussing earlier, you know, evaluating it based on how the end result of this property is going to fit in cohesively with the neighborhood. So I think that kind of takes care of that. I understand, I mean, yeah, the way it's written, you basically would just eliminate all gravel operations.
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I'm okay with striking. I'm okay with striking. I think that we have other provisions in here that describe the manner in which the operation is meant to not be extra destructive, essentially. This is just saying we don't want you to be extra destructive when you're out there.
Right.
I think we're getting grading plans and other things, so I'm comfortable with striking A.
I think the goal may be that you should have a requirement that a final grading plan be submitted with the application that demonstrates that the property will be left in a condition that it's suitable for uses permitted by right in the district.
That's a good idea. I like that.
I think we had that. Didn't we include that, Tira, somewhere? I thought we talked about final.
Probably, but I'm looking at it in fragments in the discussion guide. So,
No. I thought we had that in there somewhere.
I think we probably do as well.
Familiar.
Why don't we just put it in? We can always take it out.
Yeah.
Here you go.
If it's a duplication.
Yeah, well, you know,
I'm sure it'll bring
take that, Tira, and
somebody will bring it to our attention.
Okay, they'll know we really mean it.
And does that?
Attorney Heller, could you say those words slowly to me?
I like them.
The final grading plan shall demonstrate that the site will be left in a condition suitable for uses permitted by right in the applicable zoning district.
Okay, I got enough of that. Thank you, I appreciate it. I do think that there is some language in there somewhere, but in the context of the discussion guide and searching, I won't find it, but that is helpful to me. Thank you.
But that'll have to be on the site plan, right? That wording?
Well, the site plan will speak for itself. You'll evaluate it and make a determination that that standard has been achieved.
Okay.
And then for B, does that language adequately cover both the intents of A and B? I would think so. I mean,
Madeline, you had some comments on that, I think.
Yeah, so basically essentially what it sounded like they were trying to do is keep the topography the way it is and make sure you're not taking out that much material, which effectively makes it so that gravel operations don't exist. I think as long as the final grading plans are consistent with engineering standards and you guys have evaluated them and you know what the final grades of the project are going to look like, they're going to be consistent with the zone. I don't think that language is necessary.
I agree, and I think that language is an invitation for an appeal of your decision.
Brian, John, Lenke, how did you guys feel about this? This is kind of in both your wheelhouses, a little more than ours.
I don't disagree with both attorneys. I feel like we're capturing the depth of excavation with the water and, you know, having the site plan. I don't think we need to have yet another line item here for even further analysis. I feel like we've captured it already. I'm okay with striking B.
John Rice, okay. I agree with Brian.
I will have to agree with Brian on that.
I'm not hearing any strong opposition to striking B from the commission. Okay. Then we can move on to item C. The processing of materials on the site shall be allowed only by special permit as part of the original application. Processing shall not take place within 300 feet of a residence. Cindy asks, is this an additional permit or is it the same permit, which is a valid question. I, having gone back, Tira read us the processing language for our current regulations, which place the distance at 1,000 feet from a residence. So 1,000 to 300 seems like a big jump, but those are two separate questions. Do they need a second special permit to process on site, or is it part of the same permit that's given to the excavation application?
I guess it's no issue if you're including the request in your initial application. It's if somebody's coming after the approval of their special permit that it becomes an issue.
Right.
My opinion is, as written, if it's not submitted with the original application, you cannot come in later. So if you want the ability to do that, I think you need to remove the language as part of the original application. And my feeling is, if it meets your special permit criteria and meets the performance standards, why should you prohibit somebody from coming in at a later date and seeking that permission?
I do not have strong feelings on this one, guys. I'm sure it is the same kind of issue that you'll get some of the NIMBYs saying, why is this being allowed in X district, B district, whatever. In this case, I don't think that's a strong enough argument against permitting an additional special permit later. But I would also accept the rationale that it should all be upfront. I think you can go either way, but I think you guys should decide.
So just so I'm trying to envision what I think this is. We issue a gravel mining permit, they start digging, and then all of a sudden they hit a whole bunch of rock and it needs to be crushed and processed and all this stuff. So this is allowing them to come back to us to get that processing portion of the site. Is that what we're trying to accomplish with this?
Yeah, so Attorney Heller's opinion is that as written, they would not be allowed to do that. It would have to be part of the original application to be permitted.
Yep.
But we have to decide whether or not we think that makes sense for Thompson.
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Lanky.
Well, it comes down to, you can't see nobody's got x-ray eyes, so you don't really know what you're gonna hit until you start digging. So it comes down to is if they need to bring in a crusher to start crushing it, because if it's not an original permit, it'll put a stall to what they're doing. So Mr. Heller is pretty much correct. I'd be a little upset if I couldn't come in and start crushing it. You know, it's good material to make. So you would put that on the special permit, to come in later, ask for a special permit. Wasn't that done with Riverside in Riverside Sand and Gravel? They came in and they asked for a crushing plant to start crushing some of the rock and stone that they dug up and everything, and they were halfway into the project.
Yes, they did. You're talking about the in Grovendale, John, by the post
Yeah.
office? Correct.
Correct, Mr. Rudd.
They did come in at a later time. We authorized that, and it was a distance from the homes on Route 12.
Correct. But I mean, the point is that you can't see what's there until, when you get into it. So it's kind of hard to say, you need to put that in before you even start. They're looking at, maybe we don't need it.
I would.
Mr. Chairman, if I may,
Go ahead.
Mr. Krogel and then Mr. Santos.
if it's part of the original application, they would apply for it, and if they, and I'm assuming would receive permission for it, and if they don't need it, they wouldn't be bringing the equipment in. It's just like covering all your bases at the beginning, crossing all your I's and T's. And if they need the processing machine, they'll bring it in. And if they don't need it, they won't waste their time bringing it. But they'll have the approval to bring it.
That's your point. Mr. Santos?
I'm just thinking, people come in with a site plan. They have test pits in various locations. They have boreholes with, geological information on them. But underground, sometimes you just, you run into things like Mr. Lanky was saying. So I think it should be allowed.
Okay. That seems to be the consensus, but although Mike does seem to disagree.
Yeah.
I'm not disagreeing. I think they should be able to have the option to bring it in right at the beginning, put it on the application. And, like any business person, if they don't need the equipment, they're not going to bring it to the site. But if they do need it, they already have the permission to do so.
Right, but you're not opposed to them having the opportunity to come in later for a special permit, or are you?
I'm not opposed to it. I just think it's do it one swoop.
All right, I think we've got consensus here, Joe. I don't think we need to vote on this one.
Yeah. Perfect. The next, so I have a question about 300 feet as opposed to 1,000 feet in our current regulations. And
that question is?
Do we think 300 is an adequate distance for processing when it's been 1,000 before?
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Lenke?
I think we should stick with 1,000. 300 feet is actually a little close, especially when you got the thing rocking and rolling, and it can make the decibel, it will be up there. It was always in the past. I guess it was with Mr. Rice's time too. 1,000 feet, I think, is because once you open up a section, that's where you want to do your processing and get moved in and keep it away from you keep the dust and whatever down from the houses, and that'll stop the people from jumping up and down. My opinion.
Joe, if I may,
Right.
where'd that 300 come from?
I'm just sure that that was something I pulled over.
So from the
Have
new
there been any complaints or issues about the 1,000-foot
No.
distance?
Oh, I think 1,000 feet is appropriate.
Yeah, and I don't think most of our applications process on site. I think it's a small amount that do.
All right, I agree with 1,000 as well.
Okay,
So it shall be.
brilliant. Okay, next item we're waiting for.
Yeah, I'm looking for Rich's response, which I did receive, and I thought I forwarded.
Yes, you did.
I'm
Just 1 second.
Do you have it easily to hand, Joe? Because I am looking. It's harder for me to look through my emails when I'm working from home.
Yeah, hold on. Well, yes. He says, I think it is permissible to have this requirement in the regulations as long as the commission can articulate some legitimate reason for having it in there. At the same time, I think Attorney Smith is generally correct. The result is that you would have a difficult time imposing this new requirement on the renewal of an earth removal special permit that was originally approved under the existing regulations, but you can legitimately impose it on any operation which is authorized for the first time under a special permit issued under the new regulations.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I agreed with that logic. And obviously, any permit that's issued prior to the adoption of these regulations, whatever conditions were set, those are the conditions that were set. I don't think anybody's suggesting that we would impose new conditions on existing permits. You can't do that.
Yeah.
You know, and that actually gets to John's point earlier in the
Correct.
evening about partial reclamation, and I think that that is desirable to have that ability to, you know, say, here's your phases. We want to see this reclamation start.
Joe, I
Yes,
can't raise my hand. I'm right here.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear about something. We are staying with C as written, except we're changing 300 to 1,000. Is that correct? So
I'm sorry. No, that's not correct. We are striking where it says as part of the original application.
Why so?
Because we want to give the opportunity for an applicant who originally didn't think they would need processing on site to come in later and apply again for another. Now, so it can be done either way. It can either be done at the time of the original application or it can be done afterwards.
But does he have to get another permit if he needs to do that? Kind of go through the whole.
Yes, the
Yeah,
applicant,
another special permit.
the applicant would need another special permit with another public hearing.
Well, I
Can I
don't
ask-
think.
Joe, can I ask Mr.
Leave it in.
Attorney Heller, is it possible if we approve the original site plan that when they come in for a renewal or any other time that we can modify the approved site plan? I think we've
No,
done.
the purpose of a renewal, and Madeline's comment is correct. The purpose of a renewal is solely for the commission to review current site conditions to make sure that the operation is being conducted in accordance with the plan that you issued the special permit for. And if it is, you have no discretion. You're required to approve the renewal. If they want to modify it or introduce processing where it was not part of the original application, they would have to file a new application at that time.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we should do that. I think we should keep it there, just like it's written, as part of the original application. Why should you penalize them to have to come in twice if they need it?
My
So-
understanding, they're not forbidden from applying for that if they are anticipating it.
That's correct.
Am I right?
That's correct.
Right, but yeah, the intent was to give the applicant the most flexibility. So an applicant can come in for the original application, apply for the gravel operation and the processing at the same time. But what some people were concerned about is what if they discovered afterwards that they needed to process more than they expected or in a different way than they expected. We want them to have the opportunity to then come in and make another application.
Unanticipated up front.
And unanticipated, yeah.
Yeah, but if you put it as part of the original application and the applicant has the option to do it or not do it,
He does have.
I don't think it's correct to require the applicant to come in again for the special permit to process it if he finds out he has to process it.
He wouldn't have, Bob, he wouldn't have to come back in if he puts it on the original site plan and application. But if he
I thought
neglects
the
it,
take that out.
No, what we're taking out, Bob, is language that says it can only be done if you identify the need up front.
Yeah.
But
That's what striking that does. It
Right.
creates less of a box in.
As written, it would prohibit someone from coming in later to apply for processing.
oh, good.
If you don't
same
strike
area.
the original application,
Yeah, they're saying that they're striking it.
yes, they're striking that so that it can either be part of the original application, or if it's later on, they need another application.
Moving on, Joe.
Agreed.
Okay, so with Attorney Roberts' response, do we want to keep it as written, since Attorney Roberts indicates that he thinks it is legally sound?
Yeah, I think you should leave this here. I think it's very consistent with some of the intent that you have shown about being as non-disruptive as possible, restoring as quickly as possible. We've made concessions that some of the language was illogical in terms of not being able to disturb topography and that kind of thing. But this, I think this is more than reasonable to suggest that if a large multi-phased operation is going on and it's closing phases, that reclamation should start at, that you should have the ability to request that reclamation start.
As I understand what you just read into the record as Attorney Roberts' opinion,
Mm-hmm.
that reclamation would have to be provided for on the original special permit and site plan that you approved.
That's right.
Okay.
Good point.
Yeah, I agree with that interpretation. I'm not saying this shouldn't be edited at all. I'm sorry, I should have been more clear.
And
I'll
I
need
agree
to
with- and I
refine
agree
the
with you.
language. Yeah, I'll need to refine the language, but the principle of the item, I think, is sound.
Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Page 54C, standards for earth removal, the hours, and the days. So this is item 12, 12A. Such additional conditions may include but are not limited to the dates and hours of operation. It's suggested that we should explicitly state what those hours are. As they currently stand, yeah, I got off, I'm like,
I believe, Joe, it's Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. And that Saturday is 7 to 1, but I thought it was 12, 7 to 12, no operation on Sunday or legal holidays.
so yeah, ours, I think
Well-
I think you're right. Ours are 12. The 7 to 1 is suggested towns in the area. Tira's suggesting no Saturdays at all, based on recent controversy.
Doesn't say no Sundays, does it?
It does say no Sundays.
Yeah, I think, Joe, you know, a gravel operation, if anybody's selling gravel, you know, they have a limited time to do that, primarily in the summer, spring and summer, and early fall. Other than that, you know, to getting snowed in and everything else, I think Saturday should stay in from, you know, at 7 to noontime. Somebody wants to have a barbecue in their backyard, have it 1 o'clock on Saturday.
Mr. Santos.
Mr. Chairman, I agree with John Rice. I also think that, Saturdays, depending on the gravel mining operation, the smaller outfits would probably take advantage of that Saturday work time, where the larger operations we can limit with the special permit. So I'm in favor of keeping the 7 to noon on Saturdays and the standard Monday to Friday, 7 to 5, no holidays, no Sundays.
Okay, any opposition? Okay, I hear none. So we'll set those.
I got it.
Perfect. The next one's all set. And the next question is bonding, right? Our current regulations are at 6,000 an acre. There was a comment that said 6,000 an acre is not enough, that we should raise that. And then we want to make sure that we include the types of bonds that we will accept. So what amount does the commission feel is correct?
What question I have is, when was the 6,000 created?
Great question.
I asked Cindy that very question, and neither one of us had an answer. It's probably been in the zoning regulations since they were adopted.
Mr. Rice should know. He's been on the commission.
That's true.
What do you think, John?
That is true, but I don't remember what I did yesterday.
Well, you're the elder of the group, so.
Right.
I mean, the easy answer is that at earliest it was at latest it was 2012, right? That's the most recent revision.
I don't recall ever changing it or adding it. I think that was in the original.
So we're talking,
1978. You'd have to go back to all these first books, which I have in the basement. But
so Brian, it's possible the $6,000 amount is older than I am.
Yeah.
So I'll flip it over to the attorneys. What have you guys seen for this?
I think what you should do, because putting a hard fast number in that makes no sense, because the economics change. You should require the applicant to submit a bond estimate for site restoration with the application. You have that reviewed by your town engineer, and based on the information you get, you set the bond as part of one of the conditions of the special permit.
I mean, your bonding is at your discretion in other instances where you bond.
Well, it's also at
You've
the
just been
discretion-
using this formulaically.
But they right now they can increase the bond beyond $6,000 if they find it's necessary.
I don't think they can if you have a hard fast number in your regulations.
No, it says no. We have a clause that says that if they can increase it if they feel it's necessary. I'll pick up my book here.
Well, I guess would the answer to the question be that the bond should be set at the discretion of the commission, however that ends up getting phrased, in an amount that would not be less than $6,000 an acre, which is the current level, giving you wider latitude if you think it's necessary.
I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, that could be, or is the process for other bonding is exactly how Attorney Heller described it, correct?
What, that you have wide discretion?
That
You have it here, look at the reclamation, what the cost would be to reclaim the site.
You require an estimate from the applicant.
right. Yeah, the applicant provides a bond estimate. Like I think about with Madison Road, right? We got a bond estimate. We gave it to DPW, and they said,
Right.
"Nah, how about this?" And
Right.
we met them somewhere in the middle.
That was a whole different issue, Mr.
So the applicant would provide the bond estimate for review by the commission.
Right. Yep.
Just, if I may, sir,
Which
please.
the commission may then revise.
Mr. Krogel?
I looked up on the inflation calculator that if you took out $6,000 in 1978, it is now worth $23,500.
Thank you, Mr. Krogel.
You're welcome.
Madeline, is anybody asking Rawson to bond at $23,000 an acre?
It depends what kind of bond it is, then no.
Just for your edification, the current numbers that we're seeing are about 8,000 to 8,500 an acre. But again, that's a today number, and I think you're better served if you have a formula rather than thinking about a hard and fast number.
They're also in surety bonds, and I know typically in the town of Thompson, we actually post the cash bond.
Yeah, we're talking about that in a second. Yeah.
Yeah. No, we.
I mean, you guys have voted to allow surety bonds. It just never made it into the revised language that you can find online. There are minutes that reflect that. I know that there are.
Yeah. And we want to make sure. I mean,
It was not granted because it wasn't on the record.
yeah. So I think we do want to make. I mean, we do want to make sure that the surety bond gets into this draft if it isn't already.
I don't think it was included in this language, but it will be now.
Yeah.
Let's
Mr. Rice?
make a decision. Let's make it at $88,000 and be done with it. Or take the advice of Attorney Heller.
Yeah, I mean,
that verbiage that he used.
My concern with $8,000 is that it doesn't get changed for 45 years, and
right,
we're still at 8,000.
All right, I'll go with the verbiage that Attorney Heller suggested. And as far as the bonding, we had the type of bonding that's in our current regulations, and the legalese in the town at the time developed that legal verbiage. So we might want to look at that, what's in our current thing, and finesse that.
Yeah, make sure it reflects.
Yeah, we can do that. I know that there is a record of it somewhere from the vote that the commission took on that. I just have to find it and carry it over.
Well, it's in our current regulations. If you look at, what was pasted in.
I don't think it made it online.
Yeah, the issue is that, I think the version online is from 2012. So.
That's why I always say a hard copy is good.
So a hard copy isn't helping me in my house.
Well, I'll let you borrow mine.
So are we set with the bond issue?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Lenke.
Mike, I have a question for Mr. Rice. In the past, when you did the bond, say for earth gravel mining or whatnot, it was based on what it would cost if we had to reclaim the land ourselves. And did that bond sometimes was sufficient enough to cover the cost if you had to put it out to bid?
I don't recall ever, if I may, I don't recall ever taking a bond in the town doing that.
Well, I'm just asking that question.
Yeah, we never had. And I
Okay.
think the first one is what we've been discussing the last couple of meetings.
Okay.
Out your way.
Okay, the annual review.
I prefer the idea of the applicant to estimate what the bond is and the reclamation, the cost of reclamation, which is what the bond is per acre. And we have our engineer review that and agree with that, or we could have our town foreman say, can you reclaim this lot for whatever the applicant proposes. If it's below what our guy says, then we kick it up.
Yeah, I think that's where we're at, John. Is that right, Tara? I mean, Bob, sorry.
Yes.
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody agrees with that principle.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Wirch. Okay, the renewal period. Right, so some questions about the period of renewal. Attorney Heller has suggested 3 years. You know, as Tara mentioned, we were talking about 6 months at one point. And, you know, we want to, there's just, you know, a year from the effective date. Does that make more sense? What is the commission's desire on the review period, the renewal period?
How much is the renewal fee?
Well, I don't think we've established that in the new regulations. I was going to ask that question myself, Mike.
What's more
We
significant?
have not.
What's more significant is the cost of preparing the site plan for the renewal, which can be anywhere from $15,000 to $20,000.
Attorney Smith?
I second what Attorney Heller said, and then I believe currently you actually charge us a renewal fee based on the amount of yardage we plan to remove in that year, which actually is almost a double dip, seeing as how we paid for the original yardage with the initial application. So that was one of the things we wanted clarity on, you know, maybe just a flat renewal fee rather than continuing to charge for material we've already paid for up front.
Yeah. I agree with that, Joe, is that didn't realize that we are double dipping. If there is a fee, because Cindy, our CEO has to review that renewal application. So I would say probably a minimum of $100 or something of that nature to cover that cost. But, and I'm all for 1 year renewal application. Because a lot can happen in 5 years that they strip the land and everything else. And if the bond, it may not be worth their while to not to forfeit the bond and leave the site as is. So I think we can keep track of it on a yearly basis. But I agree, we shouldn't be charging them for the amount of material out there be taken out in phase 2 or 3 or whatever it is.
Yes, and also,
Cindy?
Getting back to John's suggestion on the renewal fee, $100, of course, you would have to add the state fee, which at this time is $60. But $100 is really not a justified amount because of the amount of work you have to go into. And if you think about it, a ZBA application for variance costs $335, which $60 of that is included for the state. So I think $100 is a little bit low for the amount of work that has to go into reviewing the application before it goes before you for renewal.
But
What would you think is reasonable then, Cindy?
I would say 200, 250. Right now you have a minimum of 500. If if it's like a dead project or a project that's sort of sitting there waiting for someone to, you know, like the two that we have, Coleman and Radinsky, which we actually waived their permit fees, but the minimum is 500. but I actually think 100 is a small amount.
But what we do,
I think 250.
Cindy, what we currently do is that we allow the applicant to use the original application or site plan, and they just color in what's been done and what hasn't been done. So I think are you suggesting on a renewal that they have to develop a new site plan?
No.
You can use the current site plan.
Yes,
and
and make adjustments.
And just adjustments. And
Yeah, that's worked. I don't see.
how much work is that to look at what they're proposing for the next cycle?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessary to have a new site plan at
So
all.
how much time, my question is, how much time would you spend on looking at a site plan that you looked at previously and you're looking at for the renewal? Say they've already completed phase 1. Now we're going to look at phase 2. All you're looking at is phase 2. How long does it take you to do that?
You have to go out there. You have to make appointments. You have to go out there. You have to take pictures. You have to organize the pictures. You have to organize the application. You have to send letters to the applicant and their representative if there are issues that are not resolved before the application goes into the approval process. It's sort of pretty much like a new application, maybe not as intense because it's new, but there's still large amount of work to be done. There's Alvin had developed some really great forms to do your criteria computation on both a new application and a renewal. I use that all the time to make my notations. Then you have to cross-check, make sure X, Y, and Z are filled out. So I believe that there is a good amount of work to do this. And, and I'm going to be very honest with you, a good test is going to be on the renewal of 363 when it comes up for next month. And there are not because of any fault of the applicant. And I don't really think I need to say any more about that at this point.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I can.
Mr. Santos.
This is a few things that run through my mind. Is number one, I want to make sure that we're obviously covering the costs that the town is expending. And there's no reason for us not to try to make a little bit of money on this and make sure it's covered, because $250, I'll support that, is minutia in grand scheme of things for what's going on with the gravel mining operation. So I support the $250 and the yearly renewal fee. And yeah, I agree with Rice that I don't want to have to.
Brian, we're not supposed to make
Just a minute, Bob. Just go ahead and let him finish. Sorry.
That's it. Go ahead, Bob.
No, I was just going to say we're not supposed to make any money.
I know. I'm just saying in general. I don't want the town to lose any money. I feel like $250 is minimal, fee for something.
Well, Bob, tell the state that so they'll deduct their $60 fee.
But I think I think the point is 250 compared to if previously it was based on the yardage of the project.
The next phase, yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I can tell you when I have to renew my real estate license, that's $425 every year just to send them a check and for them to send me a copy of a license.
Yeah.
No inspections. I just have to say I want to work. $400.
So I mean, Tira, is there I assume there's a point where we would discuss a fee schedule as a whole?
Yes. We wanted to put a fee schedule as an appendix. So that's going to be one of the last things that I do. And, we'll decide what fees are actually included on there, because there are a few of them that came up as topics. But fees change, so you don't want to include them in the body of your regulations, or else you end up charging $6,000 an acre for
42 years.
Over 40 years, yeah.
Let me just say that if you do not require the whole site to be topoed on each renewal, an annual renewal is a much less onerous task.
So you guys, your main objection here was the conditions that were suggested of having the surveyor come in and do the topos.
Yes, because that's a $15,000 to $20,000 expense.
Okay, so Cindy, so that we can move this on, can you and I sit down with the form that Alvin, that you used, that Alvin had created, and we can just come up with a better flow for that renewal item?
Sure.
Okay.
Great.
You guys can move on. We got it. We got it in the office.
And with that, friends, we have covered everything we needed to act on in standards for.
I do have one more question. I believe there was a question.
I was done.
Oh, just one more. Are we going to make a provisions, because we do have active gravel operations, are we going to make provisions that when those presently active gravel operations come up for renewal, their renewal is based on the previous regulations and not the new regulations? Are we going to address that at all?
I don't think that you have to, because their permit is under, I mean, they're operating under whatever regulations they were approved under. I think that's like any other use.
Right.
I mean, I don't think it hurts to state it, but I don't think
that's what I'm asking.
Yeah, I don't think that you have to state it.
Okay.
I think that's a right protected by statute.
Right, okay. All right.
Absolutely.
I just wanted to make sure that everybody's on the same page with that.
Excellent.
Joe, can we agree as the commission that that fee will be $250? Then when Tara and Cindy get together, that would be part of the verbiage that they're using.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah. If that's the will of the commission, then we can certainly do that.
I vote yes.
Cindy, you were concerned about 100. Is 250, do you think, sufficient?
Oh, I think that's sufficient, yes.
Is there any opposition to 250?
Nope.
Excellent. Thank you, John. Okay, so now we move on to solar photovoltaic array systems.
Good night, everyone.
I was kind of hoping.
Thank you, Attorney Smith.
Thank you.
You're not
Thank
allowed.
you. You guys have been good contributors.
Thank you. Good luck.
Just don't send us.
No bills.
The first item is actually not about solar. It's about wind turbines. We don't address them.
Thanks, Bernie.
Joe, I'm sorry. We didn't cover something on the earth removal. I had requested a site plan. Where the heck is it? An as-built on the reclamation.
I'm sorry. I skipped that because Tara said she.
Okay. All right. Okay.
No commission action was required.
Okay. Very good.
Thanks, Cindy. So should we, do we want Tara to not throw together, to carefully consider and compose a wind turbine section for our next session?
I mean, all that means is I'm going to go find some regulations about wind turbines and copy them, because it's like graveling and solar. I'm out of my wheelhouse. I know how to find a good guidance document, and I can do that. It's not that much mental effort on my part, but it is, it's clerical legwork.
Mm-hmm.
So if we left it out of our regulations right now, that doesn't mean that we don't allow them, right? Somebody would have to say, hey, I want to come down here and put them in.
Well, yes and no. So the way regulatory language works in general is, if it is not addressed, it is not permitted. However, you have allowed yourself in every district a safety valve, which is if somebody presents you a use that you haven't specifically prohibited, and it is determined by the commission that it falls within the intent of the district, it may be allowed by special permit. And there were, as you might imagine, some objections to the subjectivity of that idea. and I acknowledge that there is some risk in that, but what we determined was that that was the best way to allow for uses you can't anticipate. Having said all that, I don't know where wind turbines fall in terms of the Connecticut Siting Council. It may be that you have no authority to control them at all. I have no idea.
Yeah.
I can tell you that I was gonna attend on Friday a 3-hour-long workshop on siting for renewable energy. I was all excited for it, but now EDC has a conflict. We have to interview some candidates for something, and there's no other day we can do that. So I can't attend that. It's free, and if somebody would like me to send them the link to that so that they can listen in on that, I would love that. But obviously nobody is required to do so.
Send it.
Tyra, what day is that? Is that Friday, did you say?
Friday, it starts at like 8:45 in the morning and goes till noonish.
Send it. Send it.
I'd like to be on that.
Okay, I'll forward you the link to, it's free to register, so I'll just forward it to everybody, and anybody who wants to can do.
Great, thank you, Tara.
Because I don't know in this wind turbine thing, I don't know if I would be for or against the regulation, right? So I feel like I'm voting to keep it just out, and then if somebody presents something, we can evaluate it. But
Brian,
yeah,
down in New Haven, they have two. They just put up another one, wind turbines, right down there in the harbor.
Yeah,
there, and the regulations. They had to go by what the state what is it, under like the solar.
The Siting Council. I strongly suspect that we have no authority over it, but I can't be certain of that.
Mr. Rice?
Tara, I don't think you have to go through that. I think you covered it by what you previously just said. If it's not allowed, that I will address it at that time. And my brief experience about wind turbines, unless it's one like that's up in Worcester and large, 100-foot up in the ground. But when we were doing—
My husband works there.
Yeah, we were—
right underneath that thing.
When we were doing the Teague building, I looked into wind turbine, and from the state, there's not enough consistent wind in Thompson in that area to warrant wind turbines.
that makes sense.
We were looking at lining up these small turbines going up to the track. You know, they have different styles, but it just wasn't feasible to do that based on the amount of wind that's consistent in this area.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
All right, so you guys don't feel like we need to bust our butts to get an article in there. Good, I like that answer.
The next two items are some comments that David Held made to strike a couple items, which Tara has said she will do. The next one is about regulations for roof-mounted solar PV systems. David Held suggests that these are building code issues and not zoning issues, which was a conversation we think we had when we put them in. Tira says she definitely agrees with that for 1 and 2, sections 1 and 2. This is on page 57 for everyone. I'm sorry. Article 5A, section 4C, 2C.
I was kind of hoping that David would dial in tonight, because I know that, and correct me if I'm wrong, Alvin, but I think you conferred with him when the original solar stuff was written for Thompson.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'm inclined to take his suggestions with some weight. You know, I don't think he's representing a commercial interest in this case.
Make a suggestion, if I may, Mr. Chairman, to take it out.
The entire section?
Yes.
Oof.
Mr. Hill?
You're
Well,
breaking
I
Alvin's heart.
Let me retract that. In that, I think you're just talking to roof mounts and things. I think I don't know what's down further here, if we address a solar system in a field like that's gonna be on Monday nights.
Yeah, this section is specifically to roof mounted
Roof mounted.
systems.
Well, this, I don't know, I didn't read this truthfully, but
Yeah.
a lot of homes with roof mounted.
Can we just add something? I'm okay with striking 1, 2, and 3, but the letter C at the very end, I would say, and provide emergency egress from the roof per applicable building code standards. Can we do that instead?
We can. You can take or leave any of those. The point I think that David was making is that if it's in your building codes and your building codes change, then you've created a conflict in your regulatory structures. In other words, the building codes are the building codes and the zoning codes are the zoning codes, which is why I thought item 3 was kind of acceptable, because it's not necessarily just addressing the physical dimensions of the building, but saying don't interfere with the sidewalks,
Yeah.
which I think is more of a
Yeah.
zoning realm of authority. But you can take or leave any of them. I don't.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying roof mounted. Okay, 3 looks fine. It's roof mounted solar PV systems shall be located in such a manner as to ensure emergency access to the roof. Makes sense. Provide for smoke ventilation opportunities and provide emergency egress from the roof. I guess that could be standalone. And then letter 3 or number 3 could stay as number 1 or something. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, Brian, presently in the building code, there's no requirements for emergency access. I mean, you could build right out to the edge.
Really?
There isn't. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, in the solars that I've done, it's literally 3 feet and it's for fire personnel to get to various.
Exactly. Yeah. It may be in the fire code, but it's certainly not in the building code.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I would
Guys?
say, yeah.
Has anybody else noticed that we've lost our quorum?
No,
Just 8 minutes ago. We've only been out of quorum for 8 minutes.
We have 6.
Yeah, I think Bob went to bed.
Bob signed out.
Bob was 7.
So I see Alvin.
Yeah, there's 6.
Alvin, Brian, John. Oh, you know what it is? I missed Mike because he's signed in as Valerie.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah, no, when they
You're
signed
good.
out, I
You're
checked
good.
to make sure. So yeah, so I would be in favor of keeping 3 just as a second sentence in subsection C.
It shall be done.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Lenke.
why are we so concerned about solar on a residential house? That should be strictly into the building code, under the building inspector. Why are we having anything to do with what goes on somebody's house? That's their business. They got to meet the requirements of a roof. If the roof is 10 years old or whatever, there's requirements on that you can't do it, because in 10 years you're going to be replacing the roof, so you got to take everything down. I just feel that should be strictly under the building inspector's realm. My realm would be is anything that's going to be put on the ground or around around the house. Or
We do it with signs on buildings.
Yeah.
What's that?
We do it with signs on buildings.
If it's going to be a commercial building, but I'm just saying residential. We're talking residential, correct? On this.
Yeah.
Yes. We are talking residential, John. But remember the type of solar too. You could have a a solar array on a mounted pole that can go up as high, you can't exceed 35 feet. So
No.
now you have a fall range. Now you have a fall range, which would come under the zoning.
I'm not arguing with you there. That I would agree with you, it come under zoning because it's a pole, it's a structure. But we're
Right.
talking on a roof of a house. I'm not in favor of solar panels on roofs. I'm against them because of what has to be maintained. But an individual that owns a house and wants to put it because he thinks he's going to save electricity, that's their prerogative. If I was to do it, I'd put a pole up. That's the way to go, or put ground mounted around the house if you got the acreage to do it. This is my point of view. Why are we going over what residential, somebody that wants to put it on a
Yeah,
roof?
I think we more or less agreed to strike those items, John. Except for the one about shedding onto the sidewalk.
Does that make sense, John?
Well, you're talking a commercial piece of property now. If they were going to put roof mounted, you'd have to specify that. If it's going to be roof mounted on a commercial property, they're going to put the solars on their roof. Okay, I agree that you got to make it so if somebody's walking along the sidewalk, they don't get nailed by some sliding ice. Okay, I'll agree with that. It's on commercial property, but the way I'm reading this here, it says roof mounted or whatever. But I think that's out of our realm. As long as if it's got to do with commercial or something, I'm 100% for it. Maybe I'm just looking at it wrong.
No, John, I think you're right. This isn't a residential scale insulation. It identifies it as residential.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with what John is saying either, but I don't think it does us any harm to just kind of quote the C in the just be careful of the ice situation. I don't think we're limiting them in any way.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. In that, it's a residential, you can still have your home in, say, in that R20 zone. You got sidewalks right in front of your house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question.
Yes.
If you're leaving number 3 in, and it just has to go to the building office, because the zoning is leaving number 3 in, does that mean that the zoning office has to sign off on it? And
It would that
do
way.
they have to have a zoning permit to sign off because of number 3?
If you look at the table, which I understand is not in the discussion guide, but it specifically makes the there's an asterisk statement about residential roof-mounted solars only require a building permit, not a zoning permit.
Okay, all right.
Perfect.
So if that's the case, then how do you enforce number 3 if you don't even know that there's the potential of it being there?
Well, how about
I'm just playing devil's advocate here, guys.
No, it's a good question in terms of the logic.
It would have to, I would say if anything has to do with commercial property, or with a roof mounted on a commercial property where there's sidewalks or whatever, of people like that, I would agree 100%. But the other thing is that's out of our realm. Anything to do with commercial or commercial property or whatever, where there is a potential of a hazard for pedestrians on the sidewalk or whatever, then that would come under our realm.
Would that not fall under the building officials' guidelines or
yeah,
purview to say this is not a safe thing and he will not pass it or accept it?
Yeah, I think so.
Mike, one thing about the building code, prior to the building official signing off, let's say for a roof-mounted solar system, still needs zoning approval. That's state statute in the building code. He cannot sign any building permit without zoning approval first.
But right now, we're not asking for that, right?
I don't even know if I've ever done one, and I would have to check with Donna.
No, she would send the application down to you first before Terry would sign the permit. So if you noted it's on Route 12, where all those homes are very close to the sidewalk, you would go out or ask Terry what's going on before we sign.
Okay. I'll have to ask Donna.
Well, then
I'll take this up. I'll take this up to Donna next week while you're away, Cindy, because she's not in the office tomorrow or Friday anyway. She might be away
Monday or
next week
Tuesday.
too. Yeah. Well, I'll catch up to her.
Okay.
I think that there are some things that I'm looking at just based on the logic of this conversation, I think there's some things here in the guidelines that do make sense from a zoning point of view, and some that make less. So if Donna or Terry, if Terry happens to be in, concurs with any of that, I'll make some adjustments there. But
Yeah,
I don't think the one that came up, which was letter C, items 1 through 3, I think we've resolved. So that one we can move on from.
It's the 3 that I would be concerned about. If I have to, if somebody has to comply with it. And I don't think Donna's in till next Wednesday either. I think she's out the same amount of time I am.
Yeah, she might be, but Terry might be in because of that some extra hours. So I'll check with Terry.
Mr. Rice.
Tara, if you're saying number 3, if the building official covers that aspect of what we're anticipating in our regulation, then why don't we just take it out?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make whatever adjustments make sense after a conversation with Terry. Like I say, some of these things to me look like they make sense for zoning, and some of them look like an abundance of caution or redundancy to building. So.
Right. Because if you go into that, then Cindy's going to have to get a zoning permit and more money for somebody for nothing if the building official is already covering that.
Okay, our next point is on page 57, Article 5A, Section 4D, medium scale and large scale ground mounted installations. An installation is considered to be medium scale if it occupies more than 1750 square feet, but less than 40,000, and large scale if it's more than 40,000 or more. David Held asked, is this the footprint of the panels or the bounding rectangle of the entire array? I know what I think. Love to hear what you all think.
Your opinion, you should go first.
So I actually disagree with our planner. I think it would be logical to assume the bounding rectangle of the entire array. But the planner thinks that it seems more logical that it would be the footprint of the panels themselves.
Usually when you're talking about PV array systems, though, they're talking, when they say square footage, it's about the panel itself overall, not the footprint of the area.
And remember too, you have to have a fence around an array system and it's away from, so that should be part of the footprint.
Yeah, you also
So I
got,
still don't know what we think it is.
I think Brian agrees with you and Alvin agrees with me.
Yeah.
and how about if I agree with both of you? But you know, I mean, Mr. Santos, you know, you've done the solar arrays, and I put them up, you know, because you're the management guy, and I'm the guy that goes out and does the groundwork, and I've done on it. And like Alvin says, is you got the footprint of the panels, and you got your gap in between the panels because they have to be so many feet away from each other because of the angle, you know, to get full exposure. So that takes up more square footage or yardage, and then again with the fence. So a normal, and correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, 5 megawatt requires what, about 8 acres of land with the fencing and everything?
I think so. Yeah, it sounds.
Because they're right up here in Southbridge. I could take you right up there. There's a 20 megawatt solar system up there that's covering a whole field. It's mind boggling.
Yeah.
And you look at it and say, what? Because
Yeah.
a friend of mine, he's got 5 acres, 5 megawatt on about 8 acres of property they put it on.
Yeah. So I think in this regard, considering we're just talking about ground mounted installations, I would be fine with saying the rectangle of the entire array, because I think that just makes more sense on a ground mounted platform,
Okay.
in my opinion.
I defer to you as the most experienced construction person here. Well, you and John.
Just, for my working on these sites and, and done things, I'm just giving you my perspective, what it takes to have these installed, and where Brian, his expertise comes in, and what it takes to get the job done, and, can it be done in this area? Sometimes it can't, so they got to do the paper, the pencil pushing, and change things. But, you're looking at least a minimum of 8 acres for like a 5 megawatt system. And that's huge. It takes 2 acres, about an acre and a half for a 1 megawatt.
Yeah.
Would that be correct too, Brian?
I think so. Just stick with the rectangle. That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. Rectangle it is. I'm down with that.
The next comment is on page 58, 5A, 4D, general guidelines. David Held suggests that items 4 and 5 are not known generally when at the phase of the project when planning and zoning approval would be sought, and suggests striking those.
He didn't dial in. I think you can just go ahead and strike those. That logic is convincing to me.
Yeah.
The next one is an item, the same sort of thing. The next one says, "In as far as it is practical, utility connections shall be underground. If they cannot be reasonably underground, justification must be shown on the site plan. Electrical transformers for utility interconnections may be above ground, if so required by the utility provider." David Held says this should be dictated by... Dave, Alexa, stop. This should be dictated by the utility and their requirements.
That's true.
That's true.
That's true.
Except, do we not state elsewhere in the regulations that utilities should be underground where feasible?
Yes.
I think that we do. And if we state it there, then you can state it here.
I agree with that.
Okay.
I do too.
Okay.
I agree with her.
Yep.
And if it's not feasible, then it can't be done. No?
That's true. There you go. I like that. Perfect.
Okay, so we'll keep that.
They deal with those.
The next item is an edit Tira will make. The next one is about signs at a large or medium scale ground mounted installation.
What page are you on there, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, this is page
59.
59, Article 5A, Section 4D2G. Mr. Held says he believes this is dictated by the utility requirements and the NEC. His point seems to be that it's redundant. Tira's point is that redundancy is not harmful in this case and reinforces the requirement. It does say up to 2 square feet in dimension. Al Landry suggested striking up to 2 feet, which I think makes sense.
Yeah, I would agree to strike because I've seen larger signs than that, and they were required by utility requirements. So I think
Yeah.
strike that.
Well, what size do you want?
Strike up to 2 feet or strike the whole item, Brian?
No, I'm at 47%.
Up 2 square feet. Yeah.
Only the host can
I don't
share.
know. Or can we just say at the end of that, 24-hour emergency area, or as dictated by utility requirements in the National Electrical Code? Can we say that instead of trying to manipulate what we wrote?
How do we know what those codes? Well, we have to look up those codes.
We'd have to look them up, and they do change.
So you're suggesting striking because it could change and then our regulations could be in conflict.
That's correct. Yeah.
I would have to concur with Mr. Santos.
Okay.
But we're leaving it in. We're leaving it in.
I would leave it in just as like a minimum requirement, and then if there's anything else, it's per the NEC and utility requirements.
Okay.
Oh, okay. All right.
Did you want to strike the size requirement in general, Brian, or keep it?
No, keep it. Just keep it as written, and then just add that at the end.
Got it.
Okay.
Okay. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yes.
Excellent. Page 60, decommissioning. Section I covers the utility company equipment. David Held makes the point that the owner and town have no control over that equipment.
I was really hoping he would come in here, but I suspect that he is correct.
Alvin, do you have any insight on that?
He's not off.
No, I'm here. Now, as far as decommissioning, it's very possible that the owner, not necessarily the utility company, will just take the panels. Now, all the structural material will be, in other words, the panels that are mounted on the structure stay in place. All the owner wants to do is remove the panels. Now, it's possible in the future, all that stuff will could be used by another company. But I suggest that zoning should control decommissioning. At least, removal of the panels, that could be utility, but we still have a lot of structures on that site that are not being required to be removed.
I think the only bone of contention here is the stuff owned by the utility companies, which we may not have the jurisdiction to request removal of or to demand removal of. We can request anything we want, I'm sure. I think that's the only contention here.
Yeah, they're looking to strike and utility company electrical transmission equipment, security barriers, overhead transmission lines, utility poles from the site. That's what he's looking to strike, which I don't necessarily disagree with. The owner doesn't have any control over that equipment.
Brian, unless it's written into the contract.
Yeah, which I don't think we see either. So.
No.
So Brian, finishing it at structural enclosures for both owner operator.
Yeah. Period.
I think makes the most sense.
And then period. Yeah, and then strike the rest of it.
Okay. I got it. We're cruising, guys.
Yeah, we only got.
I just want to point out that if we can get through this, that's like the most of it. There's like 2 more pages of comments. So if we can move quickly, we can actually be caught up to where we wanted to be tonight.
Yeah.
And I think we get to talk about adult entertainment.
Yes, exactly. I was just gonna say, we've only got like 3 more actionable items, and if you hang in with us, we get some adult entertainment
I
at
got
the
a
end.
question. No, I'm like,
Keep it in.
The next one is about large-scale installations, special considerations. Um, David Held points out that anything over 1 megawatt is regulated entirely by the siting council.
Pura.
Was that?
In Connecticut, it's Pura, the siting council.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. This is about, the purpose of this section is to encourage the development of renewable energy resources while preserving core forest, prime farmlands, and other open space. We talked a lot about ways to, to do this. Understanding that we were referring to anything under 1 megawatt. I would suggest keeping it, but I'm not sure if this is on page 61 for everyone.
I'll point out that workshop that I was mentioning, there is a specific topic in one of the breakout panels about siting solar compatibly with agriculture, which is what this whole section really is. I mean, we refer to open space and core forest. I don't really think core forest is at issue for anything that's under our jurisdiction. I included it because it is something that's verifiable as a specific type of land, type of green space that exists. The specific conflict that prompted me to write this in was an agricultural conflict where, farm owners are trying to monetize by selling to solar development, which we believe they should be allowed to do, but it does create a scarcity of agricultural land for things like silage. And so this is the solution that I posited is one that is observed in Europe. This is something that they do. They have these elevated panels. Now, what the legal mechanism they use to incentivize it or control it, I don't know. But that was where all of this stuff came out of.
If I may, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Lanke.
I have pictures. I got to dig them out. When I was up in Williamstown, Mass, there was some farms up there, like have farm stands selling food, whatever. And a couple of these farms, because it's up in a mountain, they used pedestal mounted solar panels, and they had them out in their fields so that they were up off the ground, say by 10 feet, and the cows and whatnot or whatever, horses could be out in the field, do their grazing, and you didn't have your regular ground mounted structures, like you normally see. And these were pedestals, and they were all set up nice, and it looked good, and they still got the use of the land at the same time, without taking up the land where you can't do nothing. That, I think, is a good idea, but is it cheap? No. But, it's up to the individual. I think a lot of our farmers in the state are looking at that avenue, of the cost, but it's the cost too. I'm just giving you what I saw when I was up that way working a couple years ago or so,
Yeah, so I would, like I said, I would recommend keeping this section.
Yeah, it would be a good idea. It would be helpful to the agricultural industry if they wanted to do this. The farmer has a right to do what he wants with his property.
But Chairman, Alvin here.
Got John and then Alvin.
But I agree with, John B. in a sense that if the farmer was doing that type of thing, then I agree with it. But, we put in a lot of regulations, et cetera, to protect farmland from development of housing and everything else. And now all of a sudden we're allowing the farm to eliminate agricultural land. And I have a problem with that. Like I say, the farmer shouldn't be allowed to dispose of agricultural land. If he's a farmer, let him farm it, unless he's going to do that type of structure that maintains that he can still pay and do whatever.
Yeah, so this incentivizes that.
Right.
Correct.
Yeah.
Mr. Hill?
Yes, there is, I think, legislation passed in 2018 that certain soil conditions will not allow solar. Now, whether or not the siting council has that authority or oversight, I'm not sure. But there is now in statute certain soil types that will not be allowed to have solar mounted panel systems. And secondly, as for zoning, we could regulate the height of any solar panel to allow easy access to clean underneath the panels. If not, as in John's case, high enough so that animals could be grazing underneath that particular array.
Yeah.
I think it sounds like we're all in favor of this.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like to me.
That's what it says.
To me, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, to get back, I think it's a good idea with what we call the pedestal type, because it still gives the farmer or agricultural still to do what they want to do, with the animals, whatever. You're not really taking and wasting a whole piece of property with this. It gives that opportunity, but it's his cost. But a lot of them are now doing it because they get both ends of the deal. They get some income one way, and they still get the other end doing their grazing and or raising the cows or whatever they want to do. I think it's a perfect fit, but it's just got to move forward. I'm in favor of that. But take a piece of land and just put all 5 megawatt or 1 megawatt on, you're wasting a good piece of land to me. And I agree with Mr. Rice on that. We're trying to keep that, but
we'll keep this section which encourages development while preserving prime farmland. That's exactly what the section says. Yeah.
We're good. I love it when we agree.
Excellent. The next one is page 62, Article 5A, Section 5. Sorry, I jumped over one that Tira, I think you want to get with David Held on.
Well, yeah, I mean, it needs a little more clarity in the language, and I'm just going to ask him a clarifying question there, because I think it's an easy one to fix. I don't think it's one that needs discussion.
Great. The next is wireless communication. And the question is, do we keep or retain this section? Do we keep or strike this section based on jurisdiction?
Yeah, I don't see any sense in even having it in the regulations. Does anybody else can justify why we should have it in there?
I can tell you why it's in here. Because Brian Santos sent me an email and said, hey, we don't have anything about wireless communication.
That's it. I'm out.
That's the only reason that this is even in here.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I listen, gang, I'm still learning things here. I would agree with Cindy, and I'm sure that John's going to stay state guidelines. So go ahead, Mr. Rice.
In that, when we put that in the regulations, as you know, the siting council has the last word. But if we don't have regulations pertaining to that, then we have no say, because the siting council, whenever something comes up wireless, they'll send us a request to have some input, or we can be represented at the hearing. And if we don't have regulations to back up whatever we disagree with the site of the communication location, we have nothing to say. So that's why we had put that in there. We have not much power in enforcing any of this, but at least we'll have a seat at the hearing if we needed to have one, because we had regulations that we could say we don't like.
Great. That sounds like a reason to me to keep it in.
I'm gonna have to agree with Mr. Rice on that one.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
Mr. Hell?
I think a lot of this concern about wireless communication, it's not so much 4G, it's 5G, which means instead of having these 190-foot towers for 4G, even though 5G uses the towers, they go to mini towers, which means every telephone pole in town could have a 5G wireless communication system attached to it, including buildings, churches, whatever.
I think it's still outside our jurisdiction, though, except in as far as John suggests that if we have some regulations,
right,
dimensional requirements, then we have some, at least voice, if not authority.
A little bit of a negotiating chip.
Well, your cities are now using the 5G, and like Mr. Hill said, they're using buildings, rooftops, whatever they can get, because it gives them, it cuts down the, what is it, the 3-tower pyramid range?
Well, normally the large towers will take that signal and send it to the 5G, which is located virtually anywhere, just a few feet off the ground. It's not strictly towers.
Yeah, they're trying to get away from the towers, which is costly to put up.
So do we?
You're still going to need the tower to take that signal from a satellite in space and then send it to the mini towers, which could be anywhere in communities.
So do we agree to keep this section in?
I would say yes.
Yep.
No, is
Yes.
that including everything? As I'm looking, I'm down the page here on the site plan review fee.
Yeah, that's addressed in the next comment. Thea is going to strike that and
Okay.
put it on the fee schedule with everything else.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, John. And with
We're at
that,
the end, guys. Look at that.
we get to adult entertainment businesses.
Woohoo!
Woo! So
What about 745 Riverside Drive?
So there, so the 1,400 feet is actually going to become 1,250. Is that right, Tira?
Right. So Carolyn and I had a very entertaining week, back and forth talking with Rich Roberts about, what does it really mean, the separation distances? Does it have to be a property that is currently, does it have to be an available property, or does it just have to exist? And the rule is it just has to exist. So the best that Carolyn could do with her formidable mapping skills was to find a single location in the middle of the golf course which satisfies separation distances for all of the categories that we identified, except you had to shrink the envelope to 1,250 square feet. So it is true, it is conceivable, if the Honig family decides that alcohol-free exotic dancing is the business of the future, they could plunk one in the middle of their golf course. I can tell you that just driving by the strip joints on Route 20 in Worcester, I wouldn't even go into one sober, never mind stay there. So I think that this satisfies the legal requirement to address it, while not explicitly prohibiting it. This was the best we could do, guys. So it's just an explanation of where it is and why it is.
Okay.
And then the only possible piece, just one second, John, the only possible piece that Tira's asked for potential action on is, Marla asked if a site plan is needed, but because it's a special permit, then a site plan is needed, but we can reiterate it if the commission wants. Mr. Rutz.
Sarah, when you were checking out those sites in Worcester, was that for one of your bands to play in? Or?
No, it was not, but I used to drive by them on my commute to my last job.
Okay, just checking.
What's it? The Lamplighter 2, and what's the other one there?
Is it Centerfold? I think it's Centerfold.
Been in one of them in 25, 30 years. Wow.
Are they still there?
Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't know.
have a question.
They don't look like the kind of places you'd really want to hang out.
Okay, I have a question about the distance.
Yes, Mr. Krogel.
If we are requiring alcoholic beverage stores to be 1,000 feet, should this not also be 1,000 feet? Just to say
It's a
like
different use.
Different use.
It is a different use, but even 1,000 feet is a big distance. I mean, to stay away from it, all these things you have to stay away from, like you're saying, could be in the middle of the golf course. Even at 1,000 feet, you're not gaining much more space.
So let's be frank, Mike. This is actually a use that we do not want. We all more or less agree that we do not want this. But legally, for First Amendment reasons, we can't prohibit it.
Right.
So the
Right.
responsible way to address it is to permit it in a way that is physically possible but undesirable. And
Well, I
that's
was just
exactly
looking at
what we've done.
Okay, I was just looking at the continuity of the distance of 1,000 feet, that's all.
Yeah, the difference is we don't not want liquor stores. Obviously, we've got at least 2 in town. But there are conventions, because it's perceived to be a vice, that, ask for the separation distances. So that's more of a convention. This is an allowing while discouraging, and it's totally different.
Mike, to your point that, if we change it to 1,000, there may be some other locations in town.
There may be, but I don't think there'd be very many.
Well, yeah, I know, but we.
Yeah, no, I was just trying to talk about the continuity of the same.
Yeah, no, it's not a bad point based on logic in terms of consistency in language, but the desire of what we are doing is totally different with this section. So
Very well.
I don't think it's something you have to worry about.
1,500.
Hey, we did it.
Excellent. We have got to the end of a discussion guide. We still have some items to discuss next time. So let's set a meeting.
Okay, I'm going to tell you guys that the only day I can do this next week is Monday, so I hope we can get a quorum on Monday.
Please don't do Monday.
I cannot be here Monday, but that doesn't mean we can get a quorum.
Can we skip a week?
No. No, we cannot. We are in the end game stages.
You're not the only voice. Who wants to skip a week? He can't make it Monday. Joe can't. I would prefer not to. But then I'm only staff.
Well, based on this, we don't have a quorum of the people, based on just the people here. So I'll just have to send an email tomorrow, and if we have 6 or more, we'll have the meeting on Monday.
Great. Perfect. What is this, item 3 of the agenda?
Maybe. I believe the chairman will entertain a motion.
I'll entertain a motion that we adjourn this meeting.
Okay, that's
Alvin seconds it.
motion made to adjourn by John Lanke, seconded by Alvin Hill. This meeting is adjourned at 9:24 p.m. Thank you all.
You guys did good work.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Pleasant dreams.
Come on.